The holonet transmission cut through every channel simultaneously, emergency override codes that only the Chancellor's office possessed. Across 1,000 worlds, beings stopped mid-conversation, mid-meal, mid-sleep as their devices activated without input. The blue glow of holographic projectors illuminated faces in the core world's gleaming towers and the outer rim's desperate slums alike. Chancellor Palpatine's face appeared, but something was wrong. His features remained the same. The practiced concern, the grandfatherly warmth that had made him beloved across the Republic. Yet his eyes had changed. They carried depth that human biology should not allow, darkness that seemed to drink light rather than reflect it. "Citizens of the Galactic Republic," he began, his voice carrying harmonics that made the Force itself shudder. "For decades, I have served you faithfully, guided your Senate through crisis after crisis, maintained the democratic traditions that define our civilization. But I have kept one secret, a burden I carried to protect you from truths you were not ready to face." On Taris, the Emperor felt it before Palpatine's next words emerged, the sudden, overwhelming presence of the dark side manifesting across the entire galaxy simultaneously. Not localized, not hidden, but erupting like a star going supernova in the metaphysical realm. He had suspected, he had known, intellectually. But experiencing the full weight of Sidious's power now unleashed made even his ancient consciousness recoil. "I am Sith," Palpatine continued, and across the galaxy, Jedi fell to their knees as the psychic pressure crashed against their Force-attuned minds. The last inheritor of Darth Bane's legacy, the culmination of 1,000 years of patience, planning, and perfect execution. And I reveal myself now not through failure, but through absolute victory. The hologram shifted, showing footage that made the Emperor's blood run cold, despite 10 millennia of emotional control. Images of Jedi Temple archives being raided by beings in dark robes, council members falling to coordinated attacks, younglings fleeing through corridors while red lightsabers carved through stone and flesh alike. "The Jedi Order ends tonight," Sidious declared, his voice carrying satisfaction that transcended mere triumph. Not through dramatic confrontation, but through systematic elimination. "Even now, my operatives execute Order 66, contingency protocols embedded in clone programming, sleeper agents activated across their ranks, pure Sith assassins eliminating masters who might have posed threat. The light dies, citizens, and in darkness, order will finally prevail." Master Over's face appeared in a sub-window, his Syrian features twisted with pain as he ignited his lightsaber against attackers the hologram did not show. "This is Master Over of the Jedi Council. All Jedi scatter. The temple is lost. Republic forces have turned against..." His transmission cut to static, then silence. Sidious smiled, the expression carrying none of Palpatine's practiced warmth. "The Jedi claim to serve the Force's will. They were wrong. I am the Force's will, its dark avatar made manifest through centuries of Sith wisdom. And I declare the Republic dissolved, transformed into the Galactic Empire. One vision, one purpose, one Emperor to guide humanity and all aligned species toward our destiny." The Emperor watched this broadcast from Taris's command center, surrounded by his custodians, whose enhanced senses registered the same horrifying reality he perceived. The dark side was not merely present, it was ascendant, flooding through the Force like poison through veins, corrupting the metaphysical substrate of reality itself. "He's been using you," Senator Venn whispered, her political instincts finally catching up to what the Emperor had known for months. "Every threat you eliminated, every success you achieved, it removed obstacles to his transformation. You cleared the board for him." "Yes," the Emperor acknowledged without deflection or excuse. "I recognized the trap too late. Sidious has been orchestrating this since before my arrival. perhaps for decades. My presence merely accelerated timelines he had already established. The question now is not how we were outmaneuvered, but how we respond. Commander Drayson's tactical displays showed chaos erupting across Republic space, Jedi temples on 17 worlds under simultaneous assault, clone troopers, the Republic's own military forces, executing their Jedi commanders with mechanical efficiency. Senate chambers sealed, with senators trapped inside, while Sidious's operatives secured the building. "This is genocide," Kale Thross said, his former Jedi training making him feel each death through the Force like personal wounds. Not just political coup, he's eliminating an entire tradition, tens of thousands of beings in a single coordinated purge. "He's eliminating opposition," the Emperor corrected grimly. Jedi represented the only force in the galaxy capable of challenging a Sith Emperor's metaphysical authority. Their destruction is not vengeance. It is strategic necessity for someone building eternal dynasty. Sidious learned from every Sith failure in history. He will not repeat their mistakes. The holographic transmission continued, showing Republic, no, Imperial, forces securing key systems across the core worlds. Resistance was minimal, almost perfunctory. Populations who had grown comfortable under Republic governance simply accepted the transformation, because Sidious had spent years preparing them, making them fear chaos more than tyranny, convincing them that only strong central authority could prevent catastrophes like the Outer Rim secession. "He used me as boogeyman," the Emperor said quietly, recognition carrying weight of profound strategic defeat. "Built me into the external threat that justified his emergency powers. Every system I protected became evidence that the Republic couldn't defend itself. Every success I achieved proved that democracy was insufficient. I was not player in his game. I was the game piece he moved to engineer checkmate." If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Alarms shrieked across Taris's command center. Long-range sensors detected fleet movements, massive fleet movements, Imperial Star Destroyers, hundreds of them, emerging from hyperspace in coordinated strikes across Outer Rim systems. Not attacking yet, but establishing blockades, demonstrating overwhelming military superiority. A new holographic transmission arrived, this one directed specifically at the Emperor's position through channels that should have been impossible to track. Sidious's face filled the display, his yellow Sith eyes glowing with dark side corruption fully revealed. "Emperor of mankind," Sidious said, his voice carrying mockery wrapped in genuine respect. "You who claim to transcend the Force. You who believed your Imperium's methods superior to our galaxy's ancient conflicts. I offer you choice. Bend the knee to the new Empire. Serve as my enforcer across the Outer Rim where your authority already exists, or watch as everything you built burns. Your custodian order, your protected systems. Every being who trusted your protection, all will die, screaming your name, cursing the arrogance that made you believe one man's power could challenge destiny itself." The transmission showed orbital bombardment beginning on worlds the Emperor had not yet reached, systems that had petitioned for custodian protection, but remained on waiting lists, cities reducing to glass and ash, populations fleeing into wilderness that offered no safety from Imperial firepower. The message was clear: submit, or watch the Outer Rim die. "He's forcing your hand," Ven said, "making you choose between maintaining your principles and saving populations you swore to protect. If you refuse, millions die, and he claims you valued pride over lives. If you submit, he converts your authority into his enforcement arm and claims victory without firing shot." "False dichotomy," the Emperor replied, his voice carrying certainty that had sustained him across 38,000 years of impossible choices. "Sidious presents two options because he controls the framing, but I am not constrained by his limited imagination. There is always a third path, the one enemies cannot predict, because it requires accepting costs they assume you will not pay. He turned to his assembled custodians, these warriors who had chosen augmentation and purpose over institutional comfort. Sidious believes he has won, believes his transformation into Emperor is irreversible, his purge of the Jedi inevitable, his control of the galaxy assured. He has revealed himself at what he perceives as moment of absolute victory. That revelation is his first true mistake, and possibly his last. "You're going to Coruscant," Kyle said. Not question, statement of recognition. "I am going to confront Sidious directly, on ground where his power is strongest, where the dark side itself amplifies his capabilities through centuries of Sith corruption soaked into the planet's foundations." The Emperor's golden eyes blazed with determination that made even his enhanced warriors step back reflexively. "He believes I am isolated, weakened, outmaneuvered. He is wrong. I have been preparing for this confrontation since I first felt his satisfaction during the Naboo massacre. Every warrior I trained, every system I protected, every method I refined, all aimed toward this moment." "This is suicide," Drayson protested, his military pragmatism overriding respect for command authority. "Sidious is dark side avatar manifesting in physical form, operating on a planet where Sith power has accumulated for millennia, surrounded by armies loyal to his authority. You are powerful, but even you cannot defeat those odds." "You are correct," the Emperor acknowledged. "I cannot defeat those odds through conventional combat, which is why I will not fight conventionally. Sidious has revealed himself as Darkside's champion. Very well, I will challenge the dark side itself, not through light side philosophy that has proven inadequate, but through fundamental restructuring of the metaphysical principles that govern this galaxy's reality." He activated holographic star charts showing Coruscant's position relative to known Force nexuses. Mortis, the realm where Force deities dwelt, the wellspring of life where midi-chlorians originated, ancient Sith worlds where darkness concentrated, and beneath Coruscant itself, convergence points where the planet's millennia of habitation had created Force eddies that Jedi and Sith both had tapped for power. Sidious thinks in terms of light and dark, Jedi and Sith, eternal conflict between opposing forces. He cannot conceive of alternatives because his entire worldview is predicated on duality. But I come from a galaxy where such dichotomies proved false, where chaos and order were not opposites, but different expressions of deeper reality. I will show this galaxy what exists beyond the binary thinking that has paralyzed it for millennia. The journey to Coruscant required 3 days through hyperspace routes that avoided Imperial patrols, 3 days during which the galaxy burned. Holonet broadcasts showed Jedi Masters falling across 100 worlds, some fighting to the last breath, others executed in their sleep by clones they had trusted as brothers. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant became a fortress under siege, its defenders buying time for younglings to escape through tunnels that led into the planet's industrial depths. Master Lyranor's final transmission reached the Emperor on the second day. Her face was scorched, her robes torn, but her voice remained steady even as blaster fire echoed behind her. "Emperor, I was wrong about you. Not completely. You are dangerous. You do concentrate power in ways that threaten democratic principles. But Sidious is worse. He is everything we feared the dark side could produce, patient evil that wore democracy's face until the mask was no longer necessary." Behind her, a door exploded inward. Red lightsaber blades ignited in the smoke, moving toward her position with mechanical inevitability. Lyranor turned to face them, her own green blade rising in Sorasu's defensive form. "I do not ask you to avenge us. I ask you to ensure our deaths meant something. The Jedi preserved knowledge, wisdom, techniques that took 10,000 years to develop. If you defeat Sidious, do not let that knowledge die with us." Her transmission cut to static. The Emperor stood before the display for a full minute, silent, processing the weight of an entire order's extinction. He had witnessed genocides before, entire species eliminated by the Imperium's crusades when Xenos threats proved too dangerous to tolerate. But those had been his decisions, his responsibility, carried out according to strategic calculus he understood and accepted. This was different. The Jedi had been imperfect, constrained by philosophy that rendered them inadequate to emerging threats. But they had also been genuine, beings who truly believed in service, in protection, in ideals that transcended personal gain. Their elimination was not strategic necessity. It was elimination of alternatives, of voices that might question Sidious's absolute authority. He killed them because they represented hope, Senator Venn said quietly. Not because they posed military threat. He killed them because their very existence suggested that government could serve populations rather than control them. That power could be exercised with restraint, that the dark side was not inevitable. Yes, the Emperor agreed. Sidious is not merely Sith Lord seeking power. He is ideological tyrant who cannot tolerate competing philosophies. The Jedi had to die not because they were dangerous, but because they were alternative. Kyle Thross entered the command center, his cybernetic arm interfacing with tactical displays that showed Coruscant's defenses. What he found there made his force-sensitive consciousness recoil. The planet is transforming. The dark side isn't just present, it's being woven into Coruscant's physical structure. Sidious has embedded Sith runes in foundations across the entire world, turning the planet city into a massive dark side amplifier. The holographic display showed ancient Sith architecture buried beneath millennia of construction, now pulsing with reactivated power. Temples that predated the Republic resonated with energies that made the Force itself twist and corrupt. "He's attempting apotheosis," the Emperor said, his consciousness recognizing patterns similar to chaos corruption. Not merely becoming Emperor in political sense, but transcending physical limitation entirely. Sidious intends to merge with the dark side itself, becoming its avatar, a god-emperor who is simultaneously individual being and manifestation of cosmic force. "Can he actually achieve that?" Venn asked, horror evident in her voice. "In my galaxy, I witnessed beings who achieved similar transcendence," the Emperor replied grimly. "The Chaos Gods, entities born from psychic energy concentrated by mortal emotion. They were real, powerful, capable of rewriting reality. If Sidious succeeds, yes, he could become deity whose power extends across the entire galaxy through the Force itself." "Then we stop the ritual," Kyle said with warrior's straightforward pragmatism. "No," the Emperor corrected. "We complete it." The command center fell silent. Every being who had followed the Emperor from Republic space stared at him with expressions mixing incomprehension and horror. "You want him to become a god?" Drayson demanded. "I want him to attempt apotheosis and discover that the process is not what he believes," the Emperor explained. "Sidious understands the dark side through Sith philosophy, passion, power, domination. But he does not understand what I know about the relationship between consciousness and reality. He believes merging with the dark side will make him omnipotent. Actually, it will make him vulnerable in ways that physical incarnation protects against." The Emperor activated new displays showing metaphysical diagrams that blended Jedi holocron schematics with engineering principles. "In my galaxy, the Chaos Gods are powerful beyond mortal comprehension, but they are also constrained, bound by the warp's nature, unable to fully manifest without invitation. Sidious seeks to become such entity. He does not realize that gods, by their nature, are vulnerable to those who understand how to fight in their domain. You're going to challenge him in metaphysical space, Venn said, understanding dawning. Not on Coruscant's physical streets, but in the realm where the Force itself exists as tangible reality. Correct, the Emperor acknowledged. Sidious expects opposition that plays by this galaxy's rules: light side versus dark side, Jedi techniques against Sith sorcery. He cannot conceive of someone who sees the Force not as mystical energy to be revered, but as field to be manipulated according to principles he has never studied. My foreignness is not weakness. It is advantage he cannot anticipate. Kale studied the diagrams. You're planning to rewrite the Force's fundamental nature, not just defeat Sidious, but change the metaphysical substrate of reality itself. Nothing is eternal, the Emperor replied. The warp was not always chaos corrupted. It became so through mortal actions, through beliefs and emotions concentrated across millennia. If reality can be corrupted, it can also be restructured according to different principles. Sidious attempts to merge with the dark side and claim dominion over its power. I will meet him in that metaphysical space and demonstrate that the Force is larger than any binary division between light and dark. He turned to face his followers. What I attempt now is the most dangerous working I have ever undertaken. Success means fundamentally altering this galaxy's metaphysical nature, creating alternatives that have not existed since the Force first emerged. Failure means my consciousness scattered across the cosmic void, Sidious triumphant and unstoppable. Then we're coming with you, Drayson stated. You cannot, the Emperor replied gently. Where I go, physical forms cannot follow. Only consciousness can exist in the realm between reality and Force. I go alone, not through arrogance, but through metaphysical necessity. Ven stepped forward. If you fail, what happens to us? If I fail, Sidious becomes God Emperor, and the galaxy falls into darkness that will persist for millennia, the Emperor answered with brutal honesty. Your systems will be conquered, your populations enslaved or eliminated. Everything we built dies, and the lesson learned is that resistance to absolute power is futile. That's not reassuring, Kyle observed. It is not meant to be reassuring. It is meant to be true. The Emperor moved toward the shuttle bay. If I succeed, the Force itself will change. You will feel it. Every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy will feel it. The ancient binary between light and dark will crack, and through that crack, alternatives will emerge. The Emperor paused at the threshold, looking back at these beings who had chosen to follow him. What I truly want is what I have always wanted across 38,000 years, for humanity and all conscious beings to have genuine choice in how they are governed. Democracy failed here. Jedi philosophy proved inadequate. Sith tyranny offers only suffering. So I will create fourth option, not imposed by my authority, but enabled by cosmic restructuring that makes new forms of existence possible. The Golden Path, Ven said, recognizing the phrase. Yes, and if I survive what comes next, that path will exist as more than philosophy. It will be woven into the Force itself, available to any being with courage to walk it. The Emperor's golden eyes blazed with determination. This is my final work, not conquest, not mere survival, but fundamental transformation of what is possible when beings refuse to accept that current reality is only reality. He departed for the shuttle bay, his golden armor gleaming, his presence leaving absence that felt physical. The custodians watched in silence, understanding they witnessed something unprecedented. He's going to die, Drayson said quietly. Fighting a god in metaphysical space, rewriting the Force's nature. It's impossible even for him. No, Kyle corrected, his Force sensitivity picking up resonances. He's choosing transformation over stagnation. The Emperor doesn't believe in noble death. He believes in necessary sacrifice when preservation would mean accepting unacceptable outcomes. On Coruscant, in the throne room renovated during Sidious's final months as Chancellor, the new Emperor of the Sith felt the disturbance approaching, a presence that should not exist in this galaxy, moving toward confrontation with inevitability that spoke of genuine confidence rather than suicidal bravado. Sidious smiled. The Emperor of Mankind was coming, exactly as predicted, and in the metaphysical realm where apotheosis would complete, that golden fool would discover what 10,000 Jedi had learned too late, that the dark side was not forced to be defeated through power, but cosmic truth to be accepted or rejected. The endgame had begun. The Emperor's vessel descended through Coruscant's atmosphere alone, its stealth systems disabled. He wanted Sidious to see him coming, wanted every sensor in the Imperial fleet to track his approach. This was not infiltration. It was declaration. Where Jedi had hidden and scattered, where Republic forces had surrendered or fled, the Emperor of Mankind arrived in golden defiance that could be seen from orbit. Imperial Star Destroyers moved to intercept, their turbo laser batteries tracking his trajectory with mechanical precision. Fire commands were transmitted, authorized, executed. Thousands of energy bolts converged on his small craft, enough firepower to vaporize a capital ship. The Emperor's vessel passed through the barrage untouched, not through shields. The bolts simply ceased to exist when they came within 10 meters of his hull. Their energy transformed into harmless light that dissipated against Coruscant's perpetual haze. It was casual demonstration of power that transcended this galaxy's understanding of defensive technology, and every Imperial officer watching understood the message. Conventional force was irrelevant. Lord Sidious, an admiral transmitted from his Star Destroyer's bridge, voice tight with barely controlled fear. The target is not responding to defensive fire. Should we deploy fighter squadrons? No, Sidious replied from his throne room, his voice carrying amusement that made the admiral's skin crawl. Let him land. Let him walk through my city, my empire, approaching my throne with all the arrogance his power breeds. Every step he takes toward me is step away from whatever populations he thinks he protects. He comes alone because he believes himself sufficient. That hubris will be his epitaph. The Emperor's vessel touched down in Senate Plaza, now renamed Imperial Plaza in broadcasts that had blanketed the holonet. He emerged from the craft without hesitation, his golden armor reflecting the city world's billion lights, his presence radiating authority that made the dark side itself recoil slightly before pressing forward with renewed hunger. Around him, Coruscant had transformed. Where Republic architecture had emphasized openness and light, Imperial redesign favored fortification and shadow. Statues of Palpatine, now Sidious, rose from every plaza, their features noble yet subtly threatening. Red banners bearing the Empire's symbol hung from every surface, their color chosen to invoke both passion and blood. And everywhere, citizens went about their lives with expressions of carefully maintained normalcy. They shopped in markets, commuted to work, conducted business as if their entire civilization had not just experienced metaphysical coup. Because Sidious had been brilliant in his transition. No chaos, no breakdown of services, no disruption to daily routine. The Republic became empire between one heartbeat and the next, and for average citizens whose concerns centered on food and shelter and entertainment, very little had actually changed. That was the horror the Emperor recognized. Populations did not resist tyranny that left them comfortable. They accepted authoritarianism that promised stability over freedom, certainty over choice. Sidious understood this truth that democratic idealists never grasped, that most beings cared less about political philosophy than about whether their immediate needs were met. Stormtroopers appeared, not clones, but recruits drawn from populations across the core worlds, their armor white and pristine, their weapons aimed but not firing. They formed corridor leading toward the Senate building, creating path that was simultaneously invitation and threat. The Emperor walked that corridor with measured steps, his enhanced senses cataloging everything. The stormtroopers enhanced training that made them more effective than Republic security forces had been. The surveillance systems embedded in every surface, tracking his every movement. The dark side corruption that had been woven into the plaza's very duracrete, making the ground itself hostile territory for light side practitioners. Impressive, the Emperor said aloud, knowing Sidious monitored every word. You have rebuilt Coruscant in your image in less than 1 week. The infrastructure, the symbolism, the systematic transformation of Republic into Empire. This represents planning that extended years before my arrival. I congratulate you on patience I have rarely witnessed. You honor me with your recognition, Sidious's voice replied through hidden speakers, his tone carrying mockery, wrapped in genuine appreciation. I have waited decades for this moment, sacrificed much to position every piece precisely. Your arrival complicated certain timelines, but ultimately accelerated others. For that, I thank you. Your opposition made my ultimate triumph more meaningful. The Emperor reached the Senate building's entrance, now the Imperial Palace, according to the massive inscription carved into marble that had once commemorated democracy. The doors opened without him touching them, dark side energy manipulating physical matter with contemptuous ease. Inside, the transformation was even more pronounced. Where Senate chambers had been circular and open, emphasizing equality among representatives, Imperial redesign had created hierarchy through architecture. A throne sat elevated on a platform accessible only by ascending 300 steps, each step carved with Sith runes that whispered of power and domination to anyone who climbed them. Sidious sat upon that throne, his yellow eyes glowing in the chamber's dim lighting. Around him stood what remained of the Jedi Order, 7 masters, kneeling in force-suppressing restraints, their faces showing defiance mixed with despair. Master Ovair among them, his Syrian features bruised but unbowed. I preserved them for you, Sidious said, gesturing toward the captured Jedi with casual possessiveness. These represent the strongest the Order produced, masters who survived my initial purge through skill and luck. I could have killed them easily, but I wanted you to witness their final moments, to understand that even the best the light side offered could not withstand darkness when properly applied. The Emperor studied the captured Jedi, his enhanced senses reading their physical states and force signatures. They were wounded, exhausted, their connection to the light side strained by exposure to concentrated darkness. But they were not broken. Not yet. Ovair's eyes met his with expression that carried neither accusation nor plea, only grim acknowledgement of shared doom. You expect me to attempt rescue, the Emperor said. To divide my attention between confronting you and saving beings whose philosophy I have criticized extensively. You position them as hostages, believing their presence will create tactical advantage. Precisely, Sidious confirmed. You claim to transcend light and dark, to operate according to principles beyond our ancient conflict. Prove it. Save these Jedi while simultaneously fighting me. Demonstrate that your foreign methods can achieve what neither light nor dark has managed. Victory without sacrifice, power without cost. I cannot save them, the Emperor replied simply. The captured Jedi stiffened, Ovair's expression flickering with something that might have been betrayal or merely confirmation of expectations. What you demand is not merely difficult, it is metaphysically impossible, given the working I intend. Where I go to confront you, they cannot follow. Their consciousness would shatter upon entering the realm where gods contend. Then they die, Sidious said with satisfaction. And populations across the Outer Rim who believed you could protect them from any threat will learn the truth, that even the mighty Emperor of mankind must accept losses when stakes exceed his capability. Your legend ends here, broken against the same reality that destroyed the Jedi. Power has limits. Mine do not. The Emperor climbed the 300 steps toward Sidious's throne, Each Sith rune he passed, attempting to corrupt his consciousness and finding only adamantine will that had resisted chaos itself. When he reached the platform, he stood before the Sith Lord without kneeling, without acknowledging the submission such architecture was designed to invoke. "You misunderstand my nature," the Emperor said quietly. "I do not come to defeat you through superior force or greater dark side mastery. I come to demonstrate that the framework within which you seek omnipotence is false. That light and dark are not cosmic absolutes, but localized phenomena within a force that is larger, stranger, and more malleable than your Sith philosophy can comprehend." Sidious rose from his throne, his physical form showing the corruption that apotheosis had already begun. His eyes blazed with yellow fire. His fingers crackled with barely contained lightning. His presence radiated dark side energy so concentrated that it warped space itself around him. "You speak philosophy while I embody power. That is why you will fail. The Force is not field to be studied and manipulated like your precious science. It is living will, and I am that will made manifest." "Then let us test your certainty," the Emperor replied. "Here, now, before witnesses who represent both light and dark. Let us ascend to the realm where metaphysics becomes tangible and discover whether your Sith apotheosis can withstand principles your order never studied." The Emperor's consciousness expanded, reaching beyond physical form into the Force itself. Not gently, not with Jedi meditation techniques, but with raw psychic might that forced the metaphysical to acknowledge him despite his foreign nature. The throne room's reality began to crack, literally crack, as if existence were glass subjected to intolerable stress. Sidious felt it and laughed, the sound carrying genuine delight. "Yes, show me what makes you different from every other being who challenged Sith supremacy. Demonstrate your vaunted capability." The Dark Lord's own consciousness expanded in response, dark side energy flooding through him in torrents that would have incinerated lesser beings. His apotheosis accelerated, the ritual he had prepared for decades reaching completion ahead of schedule because the Emperor's presence provided opposition that made the transformation meaningful. Around them, reality destabilized. The throne room began fading, becoming translucent as another realm overlapped it. Not hyperspace, not any dimension that existed within normal space-time. This was the place beyond places, the metaphysical substrate where the Force existed as more than energy field, where consciousness could manipulate existence itself. The captured Jedi felt it and struggled against their restraints, recognizing that they were about to witness something unprecedented. Master Over's voice carried across the dissolving reality with Force-enhanced projection. "Emperor, whatever you intend, do not let the Jedi legacy die. Our techniques, our wisdom, will be preserved." The Emperor interrupted, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere as his physical form began its own dissolution. "Not through your order's continuation, but through synthesis. The Golden Path I forge will carry fragments of light side wisdom, dark side power, and principles from beyond this galaxy. You will not die meaninglessly, Master Over. You die as seed planted in soil I prepare." Sidious's laughter echoed through the collapsing throne room. "Noble sentiment, wasted effort. There is no synthesis between light and dark, only domination of one by the other, and I have already won." The throne room vanished entirely. The captured Jedi, the stormtroopers, the physical architecture of Coruscant itself, all faded into background noise as two consciousnesses ascended into a realm where thought became substance and will became law. The Emperor and Sidious stood, if standing meant anything in space without direction, facing each other in metaphysical arena that defied description. It was not place, it was not time, it was the Force itself made visible, tangible, a sea of energy that flowed according to principles that Jedi philosophy had studied for millennia without truly comprehending. And in that sea, Sidious had become something more than mortal. His apotheosis completed in the transition, his consciousness merging with the dark side to become its avatar, God Emperor in truth as well as title. He towered over the Emperor, vast beyond measure, his form simultaneously Palpatine's familiar features and abstract representation of passion, power, and domination made manifest. "Behold," Sidious proclaimed, his voice resonating through the Force itself, "I am the dark side. I am eternal hunger, unending ambition, the truth that power alone matters. You cannot defeat me because I am defeat itself, the inevitable corruption of all that resists me." The Emperor studied this God entity with analytical precision that had served him across 38,000 years. He saw the power, genuine and overwhelming. He saw the connection to the dark side, complete and absolute. And he saw the flaw that Sidious's entire philosophy had built into this apotheosis. "You are not the dark side," the Emperor replied, his voice calm despite facing deity. "You are a being who has merged with aspect of the Force that you interpret as darkness. But interpretation is not reality. The dark side exists because the Force responds to consciousness, shapes itself according to belief and emotion. You have become powerful by embracing one possible relationship between mind and cosmic energy. I will show you that other relationships exist, and that gods built on limited philosophy can be unmade by those who understand deeper truths." The Emperor's consciousness began to change, expanding in ways that had nothing to do with size. He did not grow larger to match Sidious. He grew more complex, multidimensional, his presence in the metaphysical realm shifting from single point to distributed network that touched the Force in ways Jedi and Sith both had never conceived. This was the Emperor's true capability, not merely psychic power, but understanding of consciousness itself that came from 38,000 years of study and application. He had built the Webway. He had created the Primarchs. He had sustained the Astronomicon through 10 millennia of living death. All of those achievements required manipulating reality at its most fundamental levels. And now he brought that knowledge to bear on a Force that was simultaneously more elegant and more malleable than the warp had ever been. Sidious attacked, his god form wielding dark side energy in cascades that would have annihilated planets if manifested in physical space. Lightning that was simultaneously electrical discharge and pure malevolence. Crushing pressure that was simultaneously telekinesis and existential denial. The dark side itself weaponized against an opponent who should not exist. The Emperor did not defend in any conventional sense. He restructured. Where Sidious's attacks touched him, reality changed. Not destroyed, not corrupted, but transformed according to principles that existed outside light-dark dichotomy. The Force in those locations began responding to different rules, operating according to frameworks that made both Jedi and Sith techniques partially invalid. "Impossible!" Sidious roared, his god form flickering slightly as certainty wavered. "The Force is eternal. Its nature cannot be altered." "The Force is responsive," the Emperor corrected, continuing his systematic restructuring even as Sidious's attacks intensified. "It has always been responsive, shaped by the consciousness of beings who use it, molded by belief and expectation. For millennia, Jedi and Sith have locked it into binary opposition through their philosophies: light versus dark, peace versus passion, serenity versus power. But those dichotomies are not inherent to the Force itself. They are frameworks imposed by limited understanding. The Emperor's consciousness touched something deep within the metaphysical sea, the wellspring from which midichlorians themselves emerged, the origin point of the Force's connection to biological life. Here, in this place beyond place, he could perceive what Jedi mysticism and Sith ambition had both missed. The Force was not mystical energy. It was biological network made cosmic through quantum entanglement across all living things. It could be reprogrammed. The Emperor's consciousness dove deeper into the Force's substrate, past the surface manifestations of light and dark, past the midi-chlorian connections that Jedi had identified but never truly understood. He reached for something fundamental, the quantum framework that allowed consciousness to influence reality through this galaxy's unique metaphysical architecture. And there, in that deepest place, he began to write new code into existence itself. Sidious felt it, and his godform convulsed with rage that transcended mere emotion. You dare tamper with the Force itself. This is heresy beyond comprehension. The Force is sacred, inviolate, the foundation of all existence. The Force is a tool, the Emperor replied, his consciousness fragmenting into thousands of simultaneous operations as he worked. An extraordinarily sophisticated biological quantum field that connects conscious beings through their midi-chlorians. It responds to emotion and belief because consciousness shapes quantum probability. Your Sith philosophy made it respond to passion and power. Jedi philosophy made it respond to serenity and selflessness. Both frameworks are valid, but neither is complete. The restructuring accelerated. In the metaphysical sea around them, new currents began to flow. Not light, not dark. Something else. Golden streamers of energy that operated according to principles this galaxy had never witnessed. They moved through the Force like arterial flow through a body, carrying nutrients of possibility to regions that had been starved by binary thinking. Sidious attacked these new currents with everything his apotheosis commanded. Dark side energy crashed against golden light in cascades that made reality itself scream. The throne room far below, still partially anchored to this metaphysical space, began to tear apart as the conflict leaked through dimensional barriers. Captured Jedi felt their Force connections shifting, twisting, responding to energies that their training had never prepared them for. Master Over's consciousness touched one of the golden currents accidentally and gasped as knowledge flooded through him. Not dark side corruption, not light side purity, something that felt like understanding. Raw, unfiltered comprehension of how the Force actually functioned beneath the philosophical frameworks both Jedi and Sith had imposed upon it. "What is this?" Over whispered, his words carrying through the Force to both combatants. "The Golden Path," the Emperor replied, even as he continued his metaphysical surgery on reality itself. "Third way between light and dark, not compromise. Synthesis, not balance in traditional sense. Transcendence of the binary that has imprisoned this galaxy's Force users for millennia." "There is no third way!" Sidious roared, his attacks becoming more desperate as he felt his certainty eroding. "Consciousness must choose, passion or peace, power or service, domination or submission. These are eternal truths. These are false dichotomies," the Emperor countered, his work approaching critical threshold. "Consciousness is more complex than your philosophy permits. A being can be passionate about service, can wield power without domination, can choose neither submission nor tyranny, but cooperation based on mutual benefit. Your Sith training blinded you to possibilities that exist outside your limited framework. The golden currents multiplied, spreading through the Force like neural pathways forming in a brain gaining consciousness. Each new connection made the next easier, creating feedback loops that accelerated the transformation exponentially. The Force itself was learning, or perhaps remembering, that it could be more than binary opposition. Sidious felt his god form destabilizing and panicked in ways that deities should not experience. His apotheosis had been predicated on absolute mastery of the dark side, on becoming its avatar and wielding its totality. But if the dark side was not totality, if it was merely one aspect of a Force that contained infinite other possibilities, then his godhood was built on false premise. "You cannot unmake me," Sidious said, his voice losing its omnipotent resonance and regaining something approaching mortal fear. "I have merged with the dark side completely. To destroy me requires destroying darkness itself, and without darkness, the Force loses half its nature. "I do not seek to destroy darkness," the Emperor replied, his restructuring work reaching completion. "I seek to demonstrate that darkness is not opposite of light, but absence of it, and that between absolute light and absolute darkness exist infinite gradations where most conscious beings actually live. Your binary thinking made the Force rigid. I make it fluid again." The golden currents reached critical density. In that moment, something unprecedented occurred. The Force itself achieved what might be called enlightenment. It recognized that light and dark were not competing absolutes, but complementary aspects of a larger whole, and that whole could contain infinitely more than two options. Reality in the metaphysical realm began reconfiguring. The clear division between light regions and dark regions blurred, merged, transformed into spectrum that contained both and neither and everything between Sidious's god form, built entirely on dark side purity, found itself standing in sea that no longer validated his existence. "No!" The Dark Lord's scream carried anguish beyond mortal capacity. "I worked for decades, sacrificed everything, destroyed the Jedi, transformed the Republic, all to achieve this apotheosis. You cannot simply declare it invalid." "I do not declare it invalid," the Emperor said, his voice carrying something that might have been pity. "Your apotheosis is real. Your power is genuine. Your merger with the dark side is complete. But you made fundamental error. You assumed the dark side was half of eternal whole. Actually, it is one frequency in infinite spectrum, and gods built on incomplete understanding cannot survive when reality updates to more accurate model." The Emperor's consciousness shifted from restructuring mode to direct confrontation. He had been playing defense, rewriting the Force's nature while Sidious attacked. Now, with the golden path established, he could demonstrate what fighting outside binary frameworks actually meant. He struck at Sidious not with light side purity or dark side corruption, but with something the Sith god form had no defense against: complexity. The Emperor's attacks operated on multiple frequencies simultaneously, not good or evil, not calm or passionate, but integrated assaults that used passion in service of protection, that wielded power with restraint, that combined dark side techniques with light side philosophy in ways that should have been impossible. Sidious's defenses, built entirely on dark side mastery, found themselves inadequate. Not because the Emperor was more powerful. In pure dark side energy, Sidious as avatar vastly exceeded anything mortal form could channel. But because the Emperor fought according to rules Sidious had never studied, using the Force in ways Sith philosophy declared impossible. It was like watching master swordsmen defeated by opponent who suddenly revealed the duel included guns, explosives, and orbital bombardment. Sidious had mastered his domain completely, and discovered too late that his domain was far smaller than he had believed. "This is not possible," Sidious whispered, his god form fragmenting as the Force itself rejected the absolute purity his apotheosis required. "I am the dark side. I cannot be defeated by anything except absolute light, and you are not light." "No," the Emperor agreed. "I am something your philosophy has no category for. I am being who understands that cosmic forces are not teams to join, but phenomena to comprehend and utilize. You became the dark side. I simply use the Force, all of it, without restriction to artificial categories." The metaphysical realm shuddered as Sidious's god form began its final collapse. But the Dark Lord was not finished. Desperation bred innovation, even in beings who thought themselves beyond learning. If he could not defeat the Emperor through dark side supremacy, he would demonstrate why the Sith had survived 1,000 years despite overwhelming opposition. Sidious attacked not the Emperor's consciousness, but the golden path itself, the new currents of possibility that the Emperor had written into the Force's structure. Dark side energy flooded those pathways with corrupting influence, attempting to poison them at their foundation, to prove that anything new must eventually fall to darkness, because darkness was entropy, and entropy was universal. The Emperor felt the corruption spreading and recognized the terrible genius of the strategy. The Golden Path was new, unproven, vulnerable in ways that established light and dark were not. If Sidious could corrupt it before it stabilized, the Emperor's entire restructuring would collapse and the Force would snap back to binary state, possibly with catastrophic consequences for every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy. Clever, the Emperor acknowledged. Attack not the architect, but the architecture. Demonstrate that my third way is just as vulnerable to corruption as light-side purity. You seek to prove that darkness always wins because it is willing to do what light will not. Precisely, Sidious confirmed, pouring everything his disintegrating god form could muster into corrupting the Golden Path. Your synthesis fails because synthesis requires light to compromise with darkness. And compromise with darkness is simply corruption by another name. The Emperor's response was not argumentation, but demonstration. He allowed the corruption to spread through the Golden Path's currents, and then revealed that he had designed those currents specifically to metabolize corruption. Not reject it through purity, not succumb to it through weakness, but transform it through understanding. The dark side energy Sidious poured into the Golden Path did not corrupt it. It became fuel. Raw power stripped of philosophical baggage, usable by beings who understood that emotions like passion and anger were not inherently evil, merely dangerous when uncontrolled. The Golden Path absorbed Sidious's attack and emerged stronger, more robust, validated through trial by fire. Sidious felt his final strategy fail, and his god form began final dissolution. But in that dissolution, the Dark Lord achieved something like enlightenment, horrible recognition that he had been wrong not about tactics, but about fundamental reality. The Force was not what he had believed. Power was not what he had pursued. And his entire life's work had been built on philosophical foundation that the Emperor had just proven false. I lose, Sidious whispered, the question carrying genuine incomprehension. I, who planned for decades, who eliminated the Jedi, who transformed the Republic. I lose to foreigner who arrived 1 year ago. You lose to truth, the Emperor replied without triumph. Your philosophy was incomplete. Your apotheosis was built on false premise. You could have been God Emperor in reality you believed existed. But I changed that reality, and your godhood cannot survive in universe that operates according to different rules. Sidious's god form shattered, not destroyed but unmade, his consciousness fragmenting as the dark side itself rejected the absolute purity his apotheosis had demanded. The metaphysical realm convulsed as a deity died not through superior force, but through invalidation of the philosophical foundation that sustained his existence. But the Dark Lord was not finished. Even in dissolution, even as his god form collapsed into scattered fragments of malevolent consciousness, Sidious demonstrated why the Sith had survived extinction attempts across millennia. He did not accept defeat. He transformed it into weapon. The fragments of his shattered consciousness dove not toward destruction, but toward anchor points across the galaxy. Every Sith artifact, every dark side nexus, every being who had touched the dark side and found themselves marked by its corruption. Sidious was attempting what Darth Ruin had failed to achieve, true immortality through dispersal, his consciousness scattered across 1,000 vessels so that destroying one body meant nothing. The Emperor felt the strategy unfold and recognized its terrible elegance. You would become virus rather than God, infection rather than deity. Unable to achieve apotheosis, you settle for persistence, eternal presence corrupting the galaxy from shadows. If I cannot rule as Emperor, I will endure as Nightmare. Sidious's fragmented voice echoed through the Force. Every dark thought, every cruel impulse, every moment of hatred, I will be there, waiting, growing stronger, until the golden path you forged collapses under weight of mortal weakness. The Emperor's consciousness expanded, tracking each fragment as it fled toward anchor points across the galaxy. Thousands of destinations, tens of thousands of potential vessels. Sidious had prepared for this contingency, not as primary plan, but as final backup when all else failed. Even in defeat, the Sith Lord demonstrated strategic depth that demanded respect. But the Emperor had witnessed this tactic before. In his own galaxy, demons of chaos employed similar strategies. Consciousness distributed across the warp. Impossible to permanently destroy because destroying one manifestation simply released them back into the psychic substrate. He had spent millennia developing countermeasures. You assume dispersal makes you immune to permanent death, the Emperor said, his own consciousness fragmenting in pursuit. But with control, Sidious lacked, each fragment remaining connected to his core identity. You forget that I understand consciousness at levels your Sith training never explored. Dispersal is not immortality. It is vulnerability, disguised as strategy. The Emperor's fragments caught Sidious's scattered consciousness at anchor points across the galaxy. At each location, metaphysical battle erupted as the Emperor systematically severed the Dark Lord's connection to potential vessels. Not through dark side domination or light side purification, through understanding of how consciousness bound itself to physical or metaphysical substrates. On Kariban, where ancient Sith tombs had housed dark side energy for millennia, the Emperor's consciousness confronted Sidious's fragment, attempting to merge with a holocron of Darth Bane. The battle lasted microseconds. The Emperor simply rewrote the quantum entanglement that allowed consciousness to persist in crystalline matrices. Sidious's fragment dissolved, unable to anchor without the metaphysical infrastructure the Emperor had unmade. On Dromund Kaas, where the Emperor had fought Darth Ruin months ago, another fragment attempted to possess the dark side nexus itself, to become the planet's malevolence made conscious. The Emperor's response was surgical. He introduced the Golden Path's principles into the Nexus, transforming pure darkness into spectrum that could no longer sustain consciousness built on absolute evil. Sidious's fragment found itself homeless, dissolving into background force energy. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Every anchor point Sidious had prepared over decades, every artifact, every nexus, every corrupted being, encountered the Emperor's consciousness, already waiting, already dismantling the metaphysical infrastructure that would have allowed the Dark Lord's resurrection. In the throne room on Coruscant, reality reasserting itself as the metaphysical battle concluded, the captured Jedi felt the Force transforming around them. Master Over's restraints suddenly seemed less absolute, as the dark side corruption that had empowered them found itself competing with golden currents that operated according to different rules. The Force is changing, Over whispered, his Force sensitivity allowing him to perceive what was happening across the galaxy. Not corrupting, not purifying, evolving. The Emperor is rewriting reality itself while simultaneously fighting Sidious. How is this possible? Because he is not what we believed, came a voice from the shadows. Kale Thross, having followed the Emperor to Coruscant through routes that custodian technology made possible. His cybernetic arm interfaced with the restraint systems, exploiting vulnerabilities that Imperial engineers had not anticipated. He is not Jedi or Sith, not light or dark. He is being who understands the Force as science rather than mysticism. And science can be rewritten when you understand the underlying principles. The restraints deactivated. 7 Jedi Masters rose on shaking legs, their Force connections destabilized by the Golden Path's emergence. but not destroyed. They could feel it, alternatives opening, possibilities emerging that their training had declared impossible. The Force responding to intentions that combined passion with discipline, power with service, darkness with light in ratios their philosophy had forbidden. "What has he done?" asked Master Corrin, his Ithorian vocal cords struggling to translate horror mixed with awe. The Force feels larger, like our entire understanding was seeing only fraction of what existed. "He proved our philosophy incomplete," Ovair replied, his voice carrying recognition that transcended personal ego. "The Jedi Code was not wrong, but it was not complete. The Sith philosophy was not entirely false, but it was not sufficient. And the Emperor, in defeating Sidious, demonstrated that reality contains more options than we permitted ourselves to acknowledge." Outside the throne room, Coruscant descended into chaos. Imperial stormtroopers suddenly found themselves without the dark side compulsion that had made them unquestioningly obedient. Citizens who had accepted the Empire's transformation began questioning why they had acquiesced so easily. The metaphysical architecture Sidious had built into the planet's foundations was dissolving as the Force itself rejected programming based on absolute binary opposition. And in orbit, the Imperial fleet hung paralyzed as every Force-sensitive officer aboard experienced the Golden Path's emergence simultaneously. Consciousness expanding moment that made absolute loyalty to Darkside Emperor suddenly seem like limited choice among infinite possibilities. The Emperor's consciousness completed its pursuit of Sidious's fragments. The final fragment had fled to the one place where Darkside concentration remained absolute, the Chaos Rift, the dimensional tear through which the Emperor himself had arrived in this galaxy. There, where warp energy bled into Star Wars reality, Sidious made his final stand. Ironic. The Dark Lord's last fragment hissed through the rift's energies. "I flee to the wound you created. Your arrival brought this breach. Your presence poisoned my perfect galaxy with foreign metaphysics. If I must die, at least I die knowing you will never return home." The Emperor's consciousness arrived at the rift and understood immediately what Sidious intended. The Dark Lord's final act was not resurrection attempt, but sabotage. He was destabilizing the dimensional breach, attempting to collapse it permanently, so the Emperor could never return to his own galaxy. Spite beyond death, ensuring that even in victory, the Emperor paid ultimate price. "You sacrificed your Imperium to save this galaxy," Sidious continued, his voice weakening as his last fragment dissolved. "Now you cannot even return to claim what you abandoned. You win nothing, Emperor of mankind. You trade one galaxy for another and possess neither completely." The Emperor could have stopped the collapse, could have preserved the rift, maintained the connection to his home galaxy, kept open the possibility of return. But doing so would require abandoning the metaphysical work he had begun. The Golden Path was still forming, still vulnerable, still requiring conscious attention to guide its integration into the Force's structure. He had to choose, his galaxy or this one, the Imperium he had built or the alternative he had forged. The Emperor chose. His consciousness released the rift, allowing Sidious's sabotage to complete. The dimensional breach collapsed, its warp energies dissipating back into the immaterium, the connection between galaxies severing with finality that meant no return. 38,000 years of history, 20 Primarch suns, an Imperium spanning millions of worlds, all now permanently beyond reach. Sidious's final fragment dissolved with something that might have been laughter. Victory and defeat together, how appropriate, how fitting, how entirely meaningless. Then the Dark Lord was gone, not scattered, not imprisoned, but genuinely, permanently unmade. His consciousness dispersed into the Force as undifferentiated energy, his identity erased, his threat ended absolutely. The Emperor had achieved what 10,000 Jedi had failed to accomplish. Complete elimination of a Sith Lord with no possibility of resurrection. But the cost? The Emperor's consciousness returned to his physical form in Coruscant's throne room, his golden armor now marked with cracks that had not existed before. He had fought a god in metaphysical space, rewritten reality's fundamental rules, pursued and destroyed a consciousness that had scattered across the galaxy, and sacrificed his only path home. Even he had limits, and he had exceeded them. He collapsed. Master Ovair caught him. Enemy turned ally turned witness, turned something that had no name in Jedi philosophy. The ancient Syrian's hands found pulse that should not have existed in being of the Emperor's capability, found breathing that seemed too labored for post-human physiology, found mortality asserting itself after being denied for millennia. "You're dying," Ovair said, the observation carrying neither satisfaction nor sorrow, only recognition of what sacrifice at this scale extracted. "Yes," the Emperor managed, his voice weak but still carrying authority that transcended physical state. "Rewriting reality's metaphysical substrate while fighting deity and preventing resurrection across 1,000 locations simultaneously. Even I have limits. I have exceeded them." Kale Thross knelt beside his master, his cybernetic hand finding human hand, his former Jedi training warring with custodian loyalty and finding synthesis in simple human grief. The rift collapsed. "You cannot return home. The Imperium you built will endure or fall according to principles I established." The Emperor interrupted gently. "I am not indispensable, whatever my pride suggested. The Imperium has survived 10,000 years of my effective absence. It will continue without me. Here now I was necessary. There I was habit, comfortable delusion that I alone could guide humanity's future." The freed Jedi Masters gathered around this being who had criticized their philosophy, rejected their authority, demonstrated their inadequacy, and ultimately saved their lives through methods they could not fully comprehend. Master Corran's vocoder translated thoughts his species could not otherwise express. "What you have done to the Force, what you have created, it cannot be undone. The Golden Path exists now. Every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy will feel it, will have access to possibilities we declared impossible. You have fundamentally altered our reality." "Yes," the Emperor agreed, his breathing becoming more labored. "That was the only way to defeat Sidious permanently, not by playing game according to his rules, but by changing the rules themselves. Light and dark still exist, but they are no longer only options. Beings can choose passion without corruption, power without domination, darkness without evil. The synthesis is available to those with wisdom to perceive it." The Emperor's physical form had reached its limits, but his consciousness remained sharp. 10,000 years of enduring while entombed on the Golden Throne had taught him to function beyond physical capability. He forced himself upright, despite Ovair's protests, his golden eyes surveying the throne room where Sidious's empire had already begun its collapse. "The Imperium reborn," the Emperor said, his voice carrying through the Force despite its physical weakness. "The 17 systems I protected in the Outer Rim. They will need guidance in what comes next. Sidious's empire will fragment, regional governors declaring independence, military commanders seizing territory, populations attempting to restore republic democracy without addressing the institutional failures that allowed Sidious's rise. Chaos, measured not in days, but decades. You built alternative authority, Ovair acknowledged. Systems that learned to govern themselves with custodian protection, but not custodian control. They represent what you claimed democracy could be, effective governance that actually serves populations rather than perpetuating itself. They represent beginning, the Emperor corrected, seed planted. Whether it grows into forest or withers depends on choices beings make when I am not present to guide them. That is the fundamental test. Can principles survive the death of the being who embodied them? Kale's cybernetic hand tightened on the Emperor's, You speak as if death is inevitable. We have medical facilities on Taris, custodian technology that exceeds anything this galaxy produces naturally. We can preserve you, heal you. For what purpose? The Emperor interrupted gently. I have lived 38,000 years, built empires and watched them fall, created sons who became my greatest enemies, spent 10 millennia as living corpse, sustaining Astronomicon while the Imperium rotted around me. I am tired, Kyle. Tired in ways that technology cannot repair. What I have accomplished here, defeating Sidious, establishing the Golden Path, demonstrating that alternatives to binary thinking exist. This is sufficient legacy. It is not sufficient, came a new voice from the throne room's entrance. Senator Venn entered, her political robes replaced with practical armor that custodian forces wore. Her presence radiating determination that had made her effective senator and now made her something else entirely. You do not get to sacrifice yourself and declare the work complete. The Golden Path exists, yes, but populations need guidance to walk it. The Imperium Reborn needs vision to grow beyond its foundations. You created alternative to Republic and Empire both. Now you must see it through. Behind Venn, Commander Drayson entered with 36 custodian warriors, their enhanced forms showing damage from fighting through Imperial forces to reach this location. They had followed their master into literal hell, fought their way across a planet city descending into chaos, breached the Imperial Palace's defenses through methods that would be studied in military academies for generations. The Outer Rim systems are stable, Drayson reported with military efficiency. Imperial forces there have stood down. Most were local recruits rather than core world loyalists. They recognize that Sidious's death means the Empire's death, and they're looking for new authority to follow. Your authority, if you'll claim it. I will not, the Emperor said flatly. I did not save this galaxy from one Emperor to become its next tyrant. The Imperium Reborn must learn to function without me. The Golden Path must be walked by beings who choose it freely, not because God Emperor commands their loyalty. Then what? Venn demanded, her politician's frustration bleeding through. You defeat Sidious, rewrite reality, establish alternatives that have never existed in this galaxy, and then simply die. Leave us to figure out how to implement vision we barely understand. That is not leadership. That is abandonment. The Emperor met her gaze, his golden eyes reflecting something that might have been amusement. You accuse me of abandonment, while simultaneously arguing I concentrate too much authority in single being. Choose your criticism, Senator. Either I am necessary, and therefore dangerous, or I am redundant, and therefore expendable. Both cannot be simultaneously true. Both are simultaneously true, Ovair interjected, his Syrian wisdom finding synthesis where human thinking saw only contradiction. You are dangerous because you are necessary. Your capability makes you indispensable, and indispensability concentrates power in ways that threaten democratic principles. But your principle is that power should serve rather than dominate. So the question becomes, can you embody that principle even in death? The Emperor considered this genuine consideration, not rhetorical pause. Ovair had identified the paradox at the heart of his entire existence. He had built the Imperium because humanity needed unified authority to survive the age of strife. But that unified authority had become tyranny, and he had spent 10,000 years sustaining it because the alternative seemed worse. Now, in this galaxy, he faced the same choice: die and risk everything collapsing, or live and risk becoming the very thing he opposed. There is third option, the Emperor said slowly, his consciousness touching the Golden Path's currents and finding possibilities that had not existed before his restructuring. Not life, not death, but transformation. The Golden Path exists in the Force now. Currents of possibility that beings can access regardless of whether I exist in physical form. What if I became part of those currents? not God or ghost, but guiding principle woven into reality itself. Consciousness distributed so widely that no single being could claim to speak for me, yet present enough that the vision remains accessible. The Jedi Masters recoiled at the suggestion. Master Karen's vocoder translated horror. You speak of becoming Force deity. What Sidious attempted and failed to achieve. How is your apotheosis different from his? Because I do not seek dominion, the Emperor replied. Sidious attempted to merge with the dark side to become its avatar. To wield its totality as weapon, I propose to distribute myself across the golden path as resource, available to those who seek guidance, but incapable of commanding obedience. Not deity who demands worship, but teacher who offers wisdom to students who choose to listen. That's still godhood, Kale protested, dressed in prettier philosophy, but fundamentally the same concentration of metaphysical authority that you criticized in both Jedi and Sith. Perhaps, the Emperor acknowledged. Or perhaps it is recognition that consciousness need not be binary, present or absent, alive or dead, individual or collective. The Golden Path itself demonstrates that reality contains more options than binary thinking permits. Why should my fate be limited to living or dying when other alternatives exist? Ven stepped closer, her political instincts recognizing manipulation when she encountered it. Even manipulation that might be genuinely well-intentioned, you're rationalizing, convincing yourself that becoming cosmic force is somehow less authoritarian than remaining physical leader. But distributed consciousness that whispers guidance to billions is not meaningfully less controlling than Emperor who issues direct commands. You will still be shaping outcomes according to your vision. Yes, the Emperor agreed simply. But vision is not inherently evil. The question is whether that vision serves populations or exploits them, whether it enables choice or constrains it, whether it operates through coercion or through offering alternatives that beings can accept or reject freely. I have spent 38,000 years learning the difference, often through catastrophic failure. I will not repeat those mistakes here. The throne room shuddered, not from metaphysical battle, but from conventional explosives. Imperial loyalists somewhere in the palace depths had decided that if their emperor fell, the galaxy would burn with him. Demolition charges planted during Sidious's paranoid preparations were detonating according to contingencies the Dark Lord had established. We need to evacuate, Drayson stated, his tactical assessment overriding philosophical debate. The palace is coming down. This entire district will be rubble within the hour. Then let it fall, the Emperor said, his physical form already beginning dissolution as his consciousness prepared for transformation. Let Sidious's throne room burn. Let the architecture of tyranny reduce to ash. From those ashes, something else will emerge, not perfect, not guaranteed to succeed, but genuinely new. His golden armor began fragmenting, each piece dissolving into energy that flowed into the Force's currents. Not dark side corruption, not light side transcendence. Golden energy that operated according to principles the galaxy was still learning to comprehend. The Emperor's physical body was dying, but his consciousness was transforming, distributing itself across the golden path he had created, becoming part of the Force itself in ways that neither Jedi nor Sith had imagined possible. Master Over felt it happening and understood the magnitude of what he witnessed. You are achieving what Qui-Gon Jinn theorized, maintaining individual consciousness after death while becoming one with the Force, but not through light side purity, through understanding of quantum consciousness that transcends our philosophical categories. Qui-Gon was closer to truth than his order recognized, the Emperor confirmed, his voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere as his physical form completed its dissolution. Consciousness does not require physical substrate when metaphysical alternatives exist. But the Jedi's technique required surrendering individuality to achieve transcendence. I maintain individuality while distributing presence, not because I am superior, because I understand principles they never studied. Kale reached for where his master's physical form had been and found only fading golden light. What do we do now? You've transformed yourself into cosmic principle, but populations still need leadership. The Imperium reborn still requires guidance. We're not equipped to... You are equipped, the Emperor's voice interrupted, resonating through the Force with authority that transcended physical absence. Every custodian I trained, every system I protected, every being who chose the alternative I offered, all of you carry the vision forward, not through following my commands, but through embodying principles I demonstrated. Effectiveness that serves, power that protects, authority that enables rather than constrains. The throne room's ceiling collapsed, massive durasteel beams falling where the Emperor's physical form had stood moments before. The Jedi and custodians scattered, their force-enhanced reflexes and tactical training allowing them to avoid the debris. They reached the palace's exits as the entire structure began its final collapse. Millennia of Republic history and days of Imperial tyranny, both reducing to rubble. On Taris, populations under custodian protection felt the transformation ripple through the Force. Not command, not compulsion, but presence, awareness that the Emperor of mankind existed now in a way that was simultaneously more present and less controlling than his physical form had been. Those who sought guidance could reach for golden currents in the Force and find wisdom. Those who preferred independence could ignore that presence entirely without consequence. It was, Ven recognized as she escaped the collapsing palace, exactly what the Emperor had claimed to build. Authority that served rather than dominated, power that enabled rather than constrained. Whether it would work over decades and centuries remained unknown, but the attempt itself was unprecedented. Across Coruscant, Imperial infrastructure collapsed as the dark side corruption Sidious had woven into its foundations dissolved. Power grids failed, transportation networks ground to halt, communications went dark. The planet city that had been galactic capital for 25,000 years descended into chaos that would take years to fully resolve. But in that chaos, possibilities emerged. Systems declaring independence from imperial authority. Populations attempting new forms of governance that incorporated lessons learned from Republic failure and Empire tyranny. Force sensitives exploring the golden path, discovering that they could wield passion without falling to darkness, could embrace power without becoming tyrants, could walk between light and dark in ways Jedi philosophy had declared impossible. The galaxy would never be the same. The Emperor of mankind had entered their reality, fought their greatest darkness, defeated it through principles they had never imagined, and transformed himself into something that was simultaneously more and less than the being who had arrived through cosmic accident 1 year ago. In the Outer Rim, Commander Drayson assumed leadership of custodian forces with authority that came not from the Emperor's command, but from mutual recognition among warriors that someone had to coordinate their efforts. Senator Ven began the complex work of establishing diplomatic relations between the Imperium reborn and populations attempting to restore Republic governance. Kyle Thross founded schools where Force sensitives could learn to walk the golden path, not replacing Jedi or Sith traditions, but offering alternative that honored both while being limited by neither. And through it all, the Emperor's presence remained, not commanding, not controlling, but available. Consciousness distributed across the Force itself, accessible to those who sought wisdom but incapable of imposing will on those who preferred independence. It was imperfect solution to insoluble problem. It would create new challenges even as it resolved old ones, but it was genuine alternative, and in galaxy that had been trapped in binary thinking for millennia, alternatives themselves were revolutionary. 6 months after Sidious's fall, The galaxy remained in chaos, but it was productive chaos, creative destruction that cleared ground for something genuinely new. The Empire fragmented into dozens of competing authorities. The Republic attempted restoration, but found populations skeptical of institutions that had failed so catastrophically. And in the Outer Rim, the Imperium Reborn quietly demonstrated that third options existed for those willing to build them. Master Ovair stood in what remained of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, its halls scarred by battle, but not destroyed. 73 Jedi had survived Order 66, a fraction of the Order that had numbered 10,000 before Sidious's purge. They gathered now not in the council chambers, which had been reduced to rubble, but in a meditation garden where sunlight actually reached ground level for the first time in millennia. "We cannot restore what was," Ovair stated, his voice carrying acceptance rather than defeat. "The Order as it existed is dead, our philosophy proven incomplete, our techniques inadequate to threats we faced. We failed the galaxy, and pretending otherwise serves no one." Master Corran's vocoder translated what many felt. "Then what remains? If we abandon the Jedi Code, we become indistinguishable from any other Force users. The Code is what made us Jedi." "The Code made us predictable," countered a younger master, Jocasta Nu, who had survived through hiding in the archives while her colleagues fell. "The Sith knew exactly how we would respond to every situation because our philosophy constrained us to specific paths. The Emperor demonstrated that Force users can operate outside those constraints without falling to darkness. Perhaps that is the lesson, not that our code was wrong, but that it was incomplete." Ovair activated a holocron, one that had been created not by ancient Jedi masters, but by recordings Kael Thros had made during the Emperor's transformation. The golden figure appeared in holographic form, his words preserved for students who would never meet him in physical form. "The Force is not religion," the Emperor's recorded voice stated. "It is biological quantum field that connects consciousness through midi-chlorians. It responds to emotion and belief because consciousness shapes probability at quantum levels. Your Jedi Code treated it as mystical energy requiring devotion. The Sith treated it as tool for domination. Both frameworks limited what was possible. The golden path I established operates on different principle. The Force is neutral field whose utility depends entirely on users' intention and understanding." The holocron continued, showing diagrams that blended Jedi philosophy with scientific principles the Order had never fully explored. Meditation techniques that used passion as fuel rather than treating it as corruption. Combat forms that drew power from both serenity and intensity without falling to either extreme. Healing methods that accepted darkness as part of life rather than pretending injury and death were failures of light-side commitment. "He's teaching us to be something that has never existed," Jocasta Nu observed. "Not Jedi, not Sith, practitioners of the Force who understand its mechanics rather than worshipping its mystery." "Heresy," said Master Salas, a Kel Dor whose traditionalism had helped him survive through sheer stubborn adherence to techniques that worked despite their limitations. "We honor the Force's will, not attempt to master it like tool." "The Force has no will," Ovair replied, his voice carrying conviction that months of meditation on the Golden Path had built. "That is the truth the Emperor revealed. We projected will onto neutral field, because belief that cosmic force guided us was comforting. But the Force simply responds to consciousness, according to rules that can be studied and understood." The will of the Force, we felt, was feedback from collective consciousness of all living beings, pattern recognition, not divine guidance. The gathered Jedi reacted with expressions ranging from enlightenment to horror. What Ovair suggested was not merely revision of Jedi philosophy, but its fundamental rejection, the claim that everything their Order had believed for 10,000 years was based on misunderstanding reality's nature. If you are correct, Master Salus said slowly, then the Jedi Order as philosophical tradition is dead. We cannot rebuild it because its foundation was false. We can only create something new and call it by old name through sentiment rather than continuity. Yes, Over confirmed. That is exactly what I propose. We preserve what worked: meditation, lightsaber training, commitment to service. We discard what failed: detachment that became emotional suppression, dogma that prevented adaptation, binary thinking that made every gray area seem like moral failing. And we incorporate what the Emperor taught: that Force users can be passionate about service, can wield power without domination, can operate in shades between light and dark, without falling to either extreme. Some will call this corruption, Jocasta Nu observed, claim we betray the Order's legacy. Then let them build their own enclaves and practice traditional philosophy. Over replied with pragmatism that would have been unthinkable before Sidious's purge. The galaxy is large. Multiple traditions can coexist. Those who wish to maintain orthodox Jedi philosophy can do so. Those who wish to explore the Golden Path can follow that alternative, and populations can choose which traditions' services they prefer based on results rather than rhetoric. In the Outer Rim, Senator Venn addressed a council of 17 system governors whose territories comprised the Imperium Reborn. They met on Taris, an administrative complex that had been built according to principles the Emperor had introduced: functional rather than grandiose, accessible rather than intimidating, designed to serve populations rather than impress them. "We face decision that will define us," Venn stated, her political experience allowing her to frame choices in ways that clarified rather than obscured. The Empire is fragmenting. The Republic is attempting restoration. Dozens of regional authorities are declaring independence. We could remain isolated in the Outer Rim, protecting only our own systems. We could attempt to expand, bringing the Emperor's governance model to populations that request it. Or we could join the Republic restoration, lending our credibility to institutions that failed but might succeed given another chance. Governor Cryer of Taris, the Cathar woman who had been the first to accept the Emperor's protection, spoke with directness that characterized Outer Rim pragmatism. The Republic failed because it valued procedure over results, philosophy over function, democratic purity over effective governance. Why would we rejoin institution whose entire structure enabled Sidious's rise? We have alternative. We should expand it. Expansion risks becoming what we opposed, countered Governor Thane of Bakura, a human whose system had prospered under custodian protection. The Emperor warned against this, building authority structure that grows until it becomes indistinguishable from empire we fought. We must remain small enough to maintain principles, or we repeat his Imperium's mistakes. Venn listened to the debate with political instincts that had served her through decades in the Senate. Both positions held merit. The Imperium Reborn could remain small and pure, or it could expand and risk corruption. There was no perfect choice, only trade-offs between competing goods and different failures. The Emperor's presence remains, Venn said finally, her Force sensitivity allowing her to perceive the golden currents that now existed throughout the galaxy. Not to command us, but to offer guidance when we request it. Perhaps we should consult him on this question. She opened herself to the Force in meditation techniques Kale had taught her. Not light side or dark side, but the Golden Path's synthesis. Her consciousness touched the distributed presence that had been the Emperor of mankind, that was now something simultaneously more and less than individual being. The response came not as words, but as understanding that flooded through her awareness. The Emperor's wisdom, refined through 38,000 years, and now accessible to any consciousness that sought it with genuine intent. Venn opened her eyes. He says, "We should expand, but not through conquest or even invitation, through demonstration. Continue governing our systems effectively, and populations elsewhere will petition for similar protection when their own institutions fail them. Let results speak rather than rhetoric. Build what works and trust that beings prefer effectiveness to philosophy. That is not guidance, Governor Kreia observed. That is permission to do what we already planned. No, Ven corrected. It is framework for decision-making that prevents us from becoming what we oppose. We expand only when requested, only when populations make informed choice to join us after witnessing alternatives. We never impose, never conquer, never claim that our model is only viable option. That restraint, that recognition that alternatives should exist, is what distinguishes us from Empire and Old Republic both. The Council voted 14 systems supported measured expansion according to principles Ven had outlined. 3 preferred isolation, arguing that maintaining purity required limiting growth. The majority carried, but the minority's concerns were recorded and respected. Another distinction from institutions that demanded unanimity or punished dissent. On Mortis, the realm where Force deities had dwelt in isolation for millennia, something unprecedented occurred. The daughter, embodiment of the light side, and the son, embodiment of the dark side, felt their existences destabilizing, not through attack or corruption, but through invalidation of the binary framework that had sustained them since the Force first achieved consciousness. The father, who maintained balance between his children, perceived what was happening with recognition that transcended alarm. The Emperor's golden path has not destroyed light and dark. It has revealed them as aspects of larger whole rather than totalities unto themselves. My children are not dying. They are evolving, finding their place in spectrum that contains infinitely more than binary opposition. The daughter's luminous form flickered, her voice carrying uncertainty that transcended her millions of years of existence. I feel smaller, less absolute, as if my nature is not fundamental truth but one option among many. How can this be? I am the light side itself. You are consciousness that merged with the light side and claimed to represent its totality, the father corrected gently. But light is not entity, it is frequency in spectrum. The Emperor demonstrated this truth, and reality itself adjusts to accommodate more accurate understanding. The sun's dark form writhed with anger that was also recognition. Then we are obsolete. The galaxy no longer needs Force deities to embody absolutes that do not actually exist. We are myths that reality outgrew. Not obsolete, the father replied. Contextualized. You remain powerful, remain valid expressions of Force philosophy. But you are no longer only options, and that limitation of your supremacy might be healthiest development the Force has experienced since it first emerged from biological life billions of years ago. The 3 deities, or beings who had become deities through merger with Force aspects, felt the Emperor's distributed consciousness touch Mortis itself, not invading, not conquering, but offering understanding to entities whose existences had been predicated on misunderstanding reality's nature. The father accepted the Emperor's offering, understanding that flowed through the Golden Path's currents, revealing truths that even Force deities had not fully comprehended. His ancient consciousness expanded, integrating knowledge that 38,000 years and 2 galaxies had refined into wisdom that transcended any single philosophical tradition. I see, the father whispered, his voice resonating through Mortis and beyond, touching every Force-sensitive consciousness in the galaxy. The Force is not God. We are not gods. We are beings who achieved apotheosis through merger with aspects of reality we mistook for totality. The Emperor did not defeat us. He liberated us from certainty that had become prison. The daughter's luminous form began transforming, her absolute light side purity fragmenting into spectrum that contained variations she had never permitted herself to embody. She could feel it, the possibility of being light without being absolute, of representing hope and peace and life without denying that darkness had legitimate place in balanced existence. "This is terrifying," she admitted, her voice carrying vulnerability that deities should not experience. "I existed for eons with complete certainty about my nature and purpose. Now I discover that certainty was limitation, that my absolute light was actually rejection of possibilities I deemed unworthy. How do beings function without such certainty?" "By choosing," the Emperor's distributed consciousness replied, his presence gentle despite its vast power. "Certainty is comfortable but limiting. Choice is uncomfortable but freeing. You need not abandon your nature, only recognize that your nature is one valid option among many, not the singular truth all consciousness must embrace or reject." The sun's dark form convulsed, rage warring with recognition that transcended his dark side nature. "You have unmade what we were. We were absolutes, light and dark, eternally opposed, forever in conflict that gave meaning to existence. Without that binary, what are we? What purpose do we serve?" "You serve as examples," the Emperor replied. "Demonstrations that beings can embrace light or dark completely and still maintain identity, still function, still contribute to reality's richness. But you no longer claim that your paths are only paths. You exist as options, powerful, valid, but not mandatory. That is not diminishment. That is honesty." The three deities felt the truth of his words, felt reality itself adjusting to accommodate understanding that had been absent since the Force first emerged from biological life billions of years ago. They were transforming, not dying, but evolving, finding new purposes in galaxy that no longer required binary opposition as its fundamental organizing principle. "What becomes of Mortis?" the father asked. "This realm exists outside normal space specifically to contain our conflict, to prevent our absolute natures from destabilizing reality. If we are no longer absolutes, what is Mortis's purpose?" "Sanctuary," the Emperor suggested. "Refuge for Force sensitives who seek to understand extremes without being consumed by them. Place where beings can explore absolute light or absolute dark in environment designed to contain such exploration, not prison, laboratory, not exile, school." The concept resonated through Mortis, and the realm itself began responding, its architecture reconfiguring according to principles the Emperor had introduced. The wellspring of life that had sustained the deities pulsed with new energy, not light or dark, but golden synthesis that operated according to more complex rules. In the physical galaxy, populations felt the transformation ripple through the Force. Every meditation, every use of Force abilities, every moment of Force sensitivity suddenly carried awareness that alternatives existed, that light side serenity and dark side passion were not enemies, but different frequencies in spectrum that contained infinite gradations between and beyond them both. Kael Thros felt it on Taris, where he trained the first generation of Golden Path practitioners. His students, former Jedi, ex-Sith apprentices who had rejected their masters before Sidious's purge, Force sensitives who had never joined either tradition, all gasped simultaneously as understanding flooded through their consciousness. "The Force deities on Mortis have accepted the Golden Path," Kael announced, his voice carrying awe that his custodian training had not prepared him for. The father, the daughter, the son. They acknowledged that their binary opposition was not fundamental truth. This validates everything the Emperor taught. If beings who embodied light and dark as absolutes can recognize the Golden Path's validity, then no Force tradition can claim exclusivity. One of his students, a young human woman named Mara, who had watched her Jedi Master fall during Order 66, raised her hand tentatively. "Master Kael, does this mean the old ways are wrong? That Jedi and Sith were pursuing false philosophies all along?" "Not false," Kael corrected, channeling understanding the Emperor had conveyed during his transformation. incomplete. The Jedi Code works for beings whose nature aligns with serenity, detachment, service through peace. The Sith philosophy works for beings whose nature demands passion, ambition, power through strength. Both traditions produce effective Force users when properly applied. The error was claiming that their way was only way, that beings who couldn't fit their frameworks were failures rather than evidence that reality contained more options than binary thinking permitted. Mara considered this, her Force sensitivity exploring the golden currents that now existed throughout the galaxy. So we're not replacing Jedi and Sith. We're adding a third option that synthesizes their strengths while avoiding their limitations. We're demonstrating that third option is false framing, Kale replied. There are not three options, light, dark, and golden path. There are infinite options along spectrum that contains all three and infinitely more. Some beings will thrive following orthodox Jedi teachings. Others will excel through Sith philosophy. Some will walk the golden path. And some will forge entirely new relationships with the Force that we haven't yet imagined. The Emperor's gift was not replacement for old traditions, but liberation from belief that old traditions were only possibilities. On Coruscant, in the ruins of the Imperial Palace, scavengers discovered something that would transform galactic understanding of recent history. Buried beneath rubble in what had been Sidious's private meditation chamber, they found a holocron, not Sith red or Jedi blue, but golden, pulsing with energy that registered as neither light nor dark. The holocron was brought to Master Ovair, who had become de facto leader of the surviving Jedi through combination of wisdom and willingness to acknowledge the Order's failures. He activated it with trepidation, uncertain what Sidious might have recorded before his transformation into dark side deity. But the figure that appeared was not Sidious. It was the Emperor of mankind, his golden armor pristine, his voice carrying authority that transcended physical presence. This recording had been made during his final hours in physical form, preserved for future generations who would need understanding he could provide. If you are viewing this, the Emperor's recorded image stated, then I have succeeded in defeating Sidious and establishing the Golden Path. Or I have failed, and you have discovered this holocron in ruins of dead civilization. Either way, you require knowledge that your galaxy's traditions have not preserved. The holocron began displaying information that combined Jedi lore, Sith techniques, and principles from the Emperor's own galaxy that had never before been introduced to Force philosophy. Meditation methods that used warp knowledge to manipulate the Force at quantum levels. Combat techniques that synthesized lightsaber forms with fighting styles from 10,000 years of Imperium warfare. Healing practices that accepted death as part of life rather than treating it as enemy to be defeated through light side purity. The Force is not mystical energy. The recording continued, its words echoing what the Emperor had taught but with additional detail. It is biological quantum field generated by midi-chlorians in symbiotic relationship with conscious beings. Your galaxy discovered midi-chlorians but never fully understood their implications. They are not merely indicators of Force sensitivity. They are the Force's mechanism of existence. Consciousness affects midi-chlorians at quantum level, and midi-chlorians translate those quantum effects into macroscopic phenomena you interpret as Force powers. The holocron displayed diagrams showing midi-chlorian interactions at scales beyond anything Jedi scientists had studied. Quantum entanglement between midi-chlorians across vast distances, creating instantaneous communication that appeared as Force bonds probability manipulation at quantum levels, that manifested as precognition, telekinesis, and other abilities both traditions had attributed to mystical power rather than biological sophistication. Understanding these principles allows unprecedented control, the Emperor's recording stated. But understanding also reveals limitations. You cannot violate conservation of energy, regardless of Force mastery. You cannot affect events outside your consciousness's light cone without midichlorian connection to those regions. You cannot achieve effects that quantum mechanics forbids, regardless of how powerful your force sensitivity becomes. The Force is not magic. It is extraordinarily sophisticated biological technology that evolution produced over billions of years. Master Over watched this revelation with mind reeling from implications. Everything the Jedi had attributed to mystical will of the Force was actually biological mechanism operating according to rules that could be studied, understood, and enhanced through methods the Order had declared heretical. He reduced the Force to science, Over said quietly, his voice carrying something between horror and liberation. Not to diminish it, to reveal its true nature. We worshipped mystery when we should have studied mechanism. We treated midi-chlorians as indicators when they were actually the phenomenon itself. Our entire philosophical framework was built on fundamental misunderstanding of reality we claimed to serve. The holocron continued, showing practical applications of understanding the Emperor had developed techniques for enhancing midi-chlorian activity in beings with naturally low counts. Not genetic manipulation, but quantum resonance that amplified existing biological capability, methods for detecting dark side corruption at cellular level before it became irreversible, healing practices that repaired midi-chlorian damage that standard light side techniques could not address. This knowledge is dangerous, the Emperor's recording acknowledged. It enables capabilities that traditions on both sides would consider heretical or forbidden. But danger of knowledge is always less than danger of ignorance when threats are real and immediate. You survived Sidious's purge. Others will come. Beings who understand that the Force can be wielded through understanding rather than devotion. You must be prepared to meet them with equal understanding or superior wisdom. Mysticism will not protect you when facing enemies who treat the Force as tool rather than religion. The recording concluded with final message that would be quoted in Force philosophy texts for generations. I am the Emperor of mankind. I built an imperium of 1,000,000 worlds and watched it fall to corruption. I could not prevent I came to your galaxy by accident and discovered civilizations making similar mistakes. I defeated your greatest darkness not through superior power, but through superior understanding. Now I leave you with choice. Continue traditions that failed, or embrace understanding that might succeed. Choose wisely. Reality does not care about your preferences. It simply exists, operating according to rules that work whether you acknowledge them or not. The holocron deactivated, leaving Over and the assembled Jedi in silence that carried weight of revelation. Everything they had believed about the Force was not wrong, but it was so incomplete that the difference barely mattered. We rebuild, Over said finally, his voice carrying decision that would define the Order's future. Not restoring what was destroyed, but creating what should have existed all along. We preserve Jedi traditions as one valid path among many. We incorporate Emperor's understanding as foundation that underlies all paths. And we acknowledge that beings who cannot fit our frameworks are not failures. They are evidence that reality contains more possibilities than any single tradition can encompass. On the Outer Rim, in Meditation Chamber on Taris, where the Emperor's physical form had first manifested after arriving in this galaxy, a young Force-sensitive boy sat alone. He had been orphaned during Sidious's purge, his parents killed by Imperial forces, his home destroyed. He had fled across the galaxy seeking safety and found refuge in the Imperium Reborn. Now he meditated, following techniques Kale Thross had taught, but adapting them to his own nature. Combination of light-side serenity and dark-side passion that Orthodox Jedi would have declared impossible and Orthodox Sith would have deemed weakness. He reached into the Force, touching the golden currents that the Emperor had established, seeking understanding of power that had destroyed his family and saved his life in almost the same breath. The Emperor's distributed consciousness touched the boy's awareness gently, offering guidance without commanding obedience. Not words, understanding that flowed directly into consciousness without linguistic mediation. The boy's eyes opened, glowing briefly with golden light that was neither light-side purity nor dark-side corruption, but synthesis that operated according to more complex rules. He understood now, understood that the Force was not mystical energy, but biological phenomenon, that his abilities were not gifts from cosmic will, but capabilities his own midi-chlorians made possible, that he could grieve his parents' death with dark-side passion, while dedicating himself to protecting others with light-side service. He was the first generation, the beginning of something that had never existed in this galaxy. Force users who walked the golden path, not because the Emperor commanded it, but because they discovered it aligned with their nature better than orthodox alternatives. Across the galaxy, thousands of such beings began their journeys. Some would succeed, becoming masters of synthesis that honored both light and dark while transcending their limitations. Some would fail, falling to extremes because walking balance required discipline that not all beings possessed. And some would forge entirely new paths that even the Emperor had not imagined, because once binary thinking was shattered, possibilities became genuinely infinite. The galaxy would never return to what it had been. The Emperor of mankind had entered their reality, defeated their darkness, and transformed their metaphysical substrate into something that contained alternatives where previously only binary opposition existed. Whether that transformation proved blessing or curse would be determined by choices billions of beings made in centuries to come. But the choice itself, that was the Emperor's gift, not answers, not certainty, not even safety. Just choice, preserved and protected by consciousness, distributed so widely that no single authority could ever again claim to speak for reality itself. 1 year after Sidious's fall, the galaxy had achieved something resembling stability, though stability built on foundations so fundamentally different from what had existed before that historians would debate whether this was the same civilization or entirely new one, wearing old galaxy's skin. The new republic formed from fragments of the old, but its structure bore little resemblance to what had failed. Systems maintained far greater autonomy. Regional governors held actual authority rather than serving as bureaucratic figureheads, and the Senate functioned as coordinating body rather than centralized power. It was messier than Old Republic, less efficient in abstract sense, but far more responsive to populations it claimed to serve. The Imperium Reborn expanded to 43 systems, each joining through explicit request after witnessing governance models that actually functioned. Commander Drayson led custodian forces that now numbered 3,000, still tiny compared to Republic military, but effective beyond their size through enhancement techniques and training methods the Emperor had introduced. They operated not as conquerors, but as security contractors, defending systems that requested protection while maintaining local governance structures. The Jedi Order rebuilt, but as something that would have been unrecognizable to masters who fell during Order 66. 700 Force sensitives, now trained in temples across a dozen worlds, but they studied curriculum that incorporated the Emperor's holocron teachings, alongside traditional Jedi wisdom. They learned that midi-chlorians were mechanism rather than mystery, that the Force responded to understanding as readily as devotion, that passionate service was valid path alongside serene detachment. And everywhere, beings walked the golden path, not replacing light or dark, but demonstrating that spectrum existed between and beyond binary opposition. Some struggled, falling to extremes they lacked discipline to balance. Others thrived, achieving synthesis that made them more effective than orthodox practitioners of either tradition. The galaxy was learning, through trial and error and countless small failures, how to function in reality where certainty had been replaced by genuine choice. Kale Thross stood in the training chamber on Taris, watching his most advanced students demonstrate techniques that synthesized everything the Emperor had taught. They fought with lightsabers ignited through understanding of plasma physics rather than mystical devotion. They used the Force with precision that came from comprehending quantum mechanics rather than trusting in cosmic will. They balanced passion and serenity, power and service, darkness and light in ratios that shifted based on circumstances rather than rigid adherence to philosophical absolutes. The first generation is graduating, Kale announced to the assembled custodian leadership, Drayson, Ven, and Master Over, who now served as liaison between the Jedi Order and the Imperium Reborn. 300 students who entered training knowing nothing but binary opposition, who now walk the golden path with competence that would have been impossible 1 year ago. The Emperor's vision is working, or appearing to work, Over cautioned, his wisdom refusing to let enthusiasm override caution. 1 year is insufficient to judge whether synthesis proves sustainable over lifetimes. We have eliminated obvious failures, students who fell to dark side corruption or light side rigidity, but we cannot yet know how these practitioners will function over decades of stress and temptation. Then we watch, we guide, and we adjust. Ven replied with pragmatism her political experience had refined. Perfect is enemy of good. The golden path produces better results than orthodox alternatives in measurable ways: reduced casualties, more effective conflict resolution, greater adaptability to unexpected circumstances. If problems emerge over time, we address them. That is what living philosophy does. Drayson's tactical display showed the broader galactic situation, still chaotic but trending toward stability of new kind. Imperial remnants had mostly accepted defeat, with only a handful of die-hard loyalists attempting to rebuild Sidious's empire. The Republic's restoration proceeded through negotiation rather than conquest, acknowledging that populations deserve choice in their governance, and in regions where neither Republic nor Imperium held authority, local systems experimented with their own models, some successful and some failing spectacularly. The Emperor told me once, Drayson said quietly, that civilizations were gardens requiring constant attention, that letting them grow wild produced chaos, but controlling them too rigidly produced stagnation. He sought balance, sufficient guidance to prevent catastrophe, sufficient freedom to allow innovation. I think we are achieving that balance imperfectly, messily, but genuinely. The 4 leaders stood in contemplative silence, each processing what had been accomplished and what remained uncertain. They had rebuilt civilization from ashes of the greatest purge in galactic history. They had integrated knowledge from 2 galaxies into synthesis that honored both while being limited by neither. They had demonstrated that beings could function without binary thinking once someone provided frameworks for comprehending complexity. But they also knew that what they had built remained fragile, dependent on continued commitment to principles that required discipline many beings lacked, vulnerable to charismatic leaders who might corrupt the synthesis for personal gain, uncertain whether it could survive generational transitions when the Emperor's distributed consciousness might fade or transform beyond recognition. We should consult him, Over suggested, his meditation techniques allowing him to perceive the golden currents that carried the Emperor's presence. Ask whether our trajectory aligns with his vision, whether adjustments are needed before problems become crises. Kyle nodded, and the 4 leaders opened themselves to the Force in synchronized meditation, not light side or dark side, but golden path synthesis, reaching for the distributed consciousness that had been the Emperor of mankind. The response came not as words, but as experience, consciousness expanding moment where they perceived reality as the Emperor perceived it, understanding that transcended linguistic capacity to convey. They saw the galaxy as quantum field, where probability collapsed into actuality through conscious observation and intent. They felt midi-chlorians responding to consciousness at scales from individual cells to galactic networks. They understood that the Force was not mystical energy. but sophisticated biological technology that evolution had refined across billions of years. And beneath all of that, they touched the Emperor's essential nature, being who had lived 38,000 years, who had built empires and watched them fall, who had succeeded and failed on scales that made civilizations look ephemeral, who had finally achieved something he had pursued across 2 galaxies, genuine alternative to binary thinking that too often produced binary outcomes. The vision faded, leaving the 4 leaders gasping as their consciousness returned to normal parameters. But the understanding remained, not complete, not perfect, but sufficient to guide decisions they would make in years ahead. "He approves," Ovair said, his voice carrying certainty that transcended mere belief. "Not because we have achieved perfection, but because we demonstrate willingness to adapt, to acknowledge errors, to learn from failures without abandoning principles that make learning meaningful. That flexibility, that recognition that reality teaches through experience rather than revealing itself through mystical insight, is what the Golden Path ultimately offers." On Mortis, the father meditated on transformations that had remade reality, even in this realm beyond normal space. His children, the daughter and the son, had evolved beyond their absolute natures, finding purposes in galaxy that no longer required force deities to embody binary opposition. They served now as teachers rather than enforcers, offering guidance to beings who sought to understand extremes without being consumed by them. The wellspring of life pulsed with golden energy, its waters carrying not just light or dark, but synthesis that operated according to more complex rules. Force sensitives who made pilgrimage to Mortis discovered that the realm had become what the Emperor suggested: sanctuary where beings could explore extremes in environment designed to contain such exploration. "We are diminished," the sun observed, his dark form now containing variations of shadow rather than absolute darkness. No longer gods ruling through cosmic authority, but teachers offering wisdom to students who may reject our lessons without consequence. "We are liberated," the daughter countered, her luminous form now containing spectrum rather than pure light. No longer constrained by absolute natures that demanded we reject half of existence's richness, we can be light without being absolute, can represent hope without denying that darkness has legitimate place in balanced reality. "We are evolved," the father concluded, his voice carrying satisfaction that transcended their individual perspectives. The Emperor demonstrated what we should have recognized eons ago, that absolute opposition serves no purpose except perpetuating conflict, that synthesis enriches reality where binary division impoverishes it, that consciousness benefits from complexity rather than simplicity. The 3 beings who had been Force deities felt the Emperor's distributed consciousness touch Mortis gently, offering recognition rather than judgment. They had accepted transformation that invalidated their previous existences, not easy for beings who had embodied certainty for millions of years, and that acceptance meant more than continued resistance would have. "Will you remain on Mortis?" the Emperor's presence asked, his voice resonating through the realm's foundations. "Or will you enter the galaxy and demonstrate through your own transformation that beings can transcend natures they believed fundamental?" The question hung in Mortis's timeless atmosphere, and the 3 former deities considered possibilities that had not existed before the Golden Path's establishment. They could remain here, serving as guardians of sanctuary where beings explored extremes, or they could venture into the physical galaxy, becoming living demonstrations that even Force deities could evolve beyond binary opposition. "We will venture forth," the father decided after long contemplation. "Not to rule. We relinquished that ambition when we accepted your teaching, but to guide, to demonstrate, to prove that if beings who embodied light and dark as absolutes can walk the Golden Path, then any conscious being can make similar choice." In the physical galaxy, populations felt 3 immense presences emerging from Mortis, not hostile, not commanding, but available. The daughter manifested on worlds struggling to rebuild after war, offering guidance that combined light-side wisdom with acceptance that darkness had shaped those populations in ways that deserved acknowledgement. The sun appeared in regions where anger and passion threatened to explode into violence, demonstrating that such emotions could be channeled toward construction rather than destruction. And the father moved between both extremes, showing through his own balance that synthesis was achievable even for beings whose natures pulled them toward absolutes. Kale felt their emergence and smiled, rare expression for warrior whose augmentation and training had emphasized discipline over emotion. The Force deities themselves walk the golden path. If that is not validation of everything the Emperor taught, nothing could be. On Coruscant, in the Senate chambers that had been rebuilt according to principles combining Republic openness with Imperial efficiency, Chancellor Mon Mothma addressed representatives from 200 systems that comprised the new Republic's core. She was Alderaanian, a survivor of traditions that valued dialogue and compromise, but she had learned from the old Republic's failures and incorporated lessons the Emperor's intervention had taught. "We face question that will define us for generations," Mon Mothma stated, her voice carrying authority earned through competence rather than mere democratic mandate. The Imperium Reborn requests formal recognition as independent polity rather than rebellious systems requiring reintegration. They argue that their governance model serves populations better than Republic alternatives. Some of you demand, we refuse, that we work toward reunification under single galactic authority. Others suggest we accept their independence and establish diplomatic relations between equals. Senator Orn Free Tar, somehow having survived Sidious's purge through combination of luck and political cunning, rose in his repulsor pod with indignation that had characterized his entire career. The Republic is Galaxy's legitimate government. We cannot permit breakaway regions to establish precedent that any dissatisfied population can simply declare independence and establish rival authority. The Republic failed, countered Senator Carter with bluntness that new political reality permitted. We failed to prevent Sidious's rise, failed to protect the Jedi, failed to maintain even pretense of effective governance in regions beyond the core worlds. The Imperium Reborn exists because we were inadequate, demanding their submission now, after we demonstrated our inadequacy so catastrophically, is height of arrogance. The debate continued for hours, representatives arguing from principle and pragmatism, ideology and self-interest. But what emerged was consensus that would have been impossible in the old Republic, acknowledgement that no single governance model served all populations equally well, that variety might be strength rather than weakness, that the galaxy was large enough to contain multiple legitimate authorities. I propose we recognize the Imperium Reborn as independent polity, Mon Mothma stated, after allowing debate to exhaust itself naturally rather than forcing premature resolution. Not as surrender to separatism, but as acknowledgement that different populations require different governance models. We maintain diplomatic relations. We coordinate on security threats that affect both jurisdictions. We allow populations to choose their affiliation freely through informed consent. This is not Republic's defeat. It is Republic's evolution beyond belief that we must govern everyone to govern anyone effectively. The vote was closer than Kale had expected when watching the proceedings via HoloNet. 127 systems in favor, 73 opposed. But majority carried, and the new Republic formally recognized the Imperium Reborn's independence with treaty that established frameworks for cooperation between different governance philosophies. 5 years after Sidious's fall, the galaxy had achieved equilibrium that historians would call the Golden Age, not because it was perfect, but because it was genuinely different from anything that had preceded it. The binary thinking that had dominated for millennia had fractured, and in those fractures, possibilities flourished that previous generations could not have imagined. Kale Thross stood on a balcony overlooking Taris's transformed cityscape, his cybernetic arm interfacing with data streams that showed the Imperium Reborn's expansion to 74 systems. Not conquest. Every system had requested membership after witnessing governance that actually functioned. But growth nonetheless, steady and sustainable, built on results rather than rhetoric. He would be proud, Senator Venn said, joining him on the balcony. Her hair had grayed over 5 years of leadership, her face showing lines that stress and responsibility carved into even the most capable administrators. The Emperor, whatever he has become, wherever his consciousness exists now, he would see this and recognize that his sacrifice achieved what he intended. Would he? Kyle asked, genuine uncertainty in his voice. We have built something unprecedented, yes, but we have also made compromises he might have rejected, allowed systems to maintain practices he would have considered inefficient, tolerated philosophies that contradict principles he spent 38,000 years refining. The Imperium Reborn is not the Imperium he built in his own galaxy. No, Venn agreed. It is better, because it grows through choice rather than conquest, adapts through learning rather than imposing, succeeds through serving rather than dominating. The Emperor's Imperium fell because it could not function without him. What we have built will endure precisely because it does not require any single being's presence to maintain itself. They stood in companionable silence, watching the sun set over a city that had been ruins when the Emperor arrived and was now thriving metropolis, billions of beings going about their lives with security they had never known under Republic governance or Imperial tyranny. Not perfect lives. The Imperium Reborn had its failures, its injustices, its populations that struggled despite effective government, but measurably better than what had existed before, and improving through iterations that incorporated feedback rather than imposing solutions. Across the galaxy, Master Ovair meditated in the rebuilt Jedi Temple on Coruscant, surrounded by 300 students whose training incorporated everything the Emperor's holocron had taught. They were not orthodox Jedi. Their techniques synthesized light-side wisdom with understanding of the Force's actual mechanics. Their philosophy acknowledged that passion could serve rather than corrupt. Their practices demonstrated that beings could wield darkness without falling to it. But they were not Golden Path purists either. Some students gravitated toward light-side approaches, despite understanding they were walking one frequency in infinite spectrum. Others embraced darkness more fully, using passion and power in ways that orthodox Jedi would have declared impossible. And some forged entirely new relationships with the Force that neither Jedi tradition nor the Emperor's teaching had fully anticipated. Diversity of practice within shared commitment to service, Ovair said to his senior students, his voice carrying wisdom that 5 years of teaching the Golden Path had refined. That is what the Emperor's true gift was, not replacement for old traditions, but liberation from belief that old traditions were only options. You honor his legacy not by mimicking what he taught, but by using what he taught as foundation for discovering what only you can contribute. One student, Mara, now a young woman whose power had grown exponentially under Golden Path training, raised a question that had troubled her meditation. Master, the Emperor's presence in the Force is fading. I can barely perceive the golden currents that were so obvious 5 years ago. Does this mean his teaching fails? That distributed consciousness cannot sustain itself indefinitely? Ovair considered the question carefully before responding. The Emperor's consciousness is not fading. It is integrating, becoming part of the Force's natural flow rather than remaining distinct presence. This is not failure of his teaching, but its ultimate success. He never intended to remain as cosmic authority figure guiding the galaxy forever. He intended to establish principles that would become self-sustaining and then fade into background as those principles proved their validity through results rather than requiring his constant reinforcement. On Mortis, the three former Force deities gathered in what had been the wellspring of life but was now something else. Sanctuary where beings from across the galaxy came to explore extremes in environment designed to contain such exploration. Thousands of Force sensitives made pilgrimage here annually, seeking to understand absolute light or absolute dark without being consumed by either. "We have become what we should have been from the beginning," the daughter observed, her form now containing spectrum rather than pure light, not gods demanding worship, but teachers offering wisdom to students who seek understanding. The Emperor demonstrated through his own transformation that even beings who achieve apotheosis can evolve beyond limiting themselves to singular aspect of reality. "I still hunger for power," the son admitted, his dark form writhing with passions he no longer tried to suppress completely. "But I recognize now that hunger can be channeled toward construction rather than destruction. That darkness need not mean domination, that beings can embrace their shadow aspects without becoming monsters. This is liberation, though I resisted calling it such for years. We were prisoners of our own certainty," the father concluded, believing ourselves fundamental truths rather than beings who had merged with aspects of reality we mistook for totality. The Emperor freed us not through defeating us, but through demonstrating that reality contained more possibilities than our philosophy permitted us to acknowledge. That liberation was gift, even when it felt like defeat. The three beings felt the Emperor's presence in the Force, still there but different, integrating with the cosmic flow rather than remaining distinct consciousness. He had not died in any conventional sense, but neither was he truly alive. He existed as principle more than personality, as understanding more than identity, as possibility more than presence. And in that transformation, he had achieved what he had pursued across 38,000 years and 2 galaxies. Genuine alternative to binary thinking that produced binary outcomes. In the Outer Rim, Commander Drazen reviewed reports from custodian forces operating across 74 systems. 3,000 warriors now, each enhanced through techniques the Emperor had introduced, each trained to standards that combined Jedi philosophy with military pragmatism, with understanding of the Force's actual mechanics. They fought rarely. Their primary function was deterrence, demonstration that populations under Imperium protection could not be threatened without facing consequences that overwhelmed conventional force. But when they did fight, they were devastating. Not through dark side corruption or light side purity, but through synthesis that allowed them to use whatever approach situations demanded, passionate when passion served, serene when serenity was required, lethal when mercy would enable greater harm, merciful when killing would create problems worse than whatever threat they faced. The Emperor's vision made manifest, Drazen said to his senior commanders, his voice carrying satisfaction that 5 years of successful operations had earned. "We protect without dominating. We serve without surrendering judgment. We function as institution that transcends individual members while honoring that individuals make institutions meaningful through their choices." This is what he built, not in his own galaxy where circumstances forced compromises, but here, where he had chance to implement principles without being constrained by existing structures. One commander, a Zabrak woman named Kyla, whose horns bore tattoos commemorating battles fought in the Imperium's name, asked the question that troubled many. What happens when we face threat that exceeds our capability? The Emperor could reshape reality itself. We are merely enhanced warriors, powerful, yes, but mortal, vulnerable, finite. Then we call for help, Drazen replied simply. From the Republic, from the Jedi, from populations we protect, who have agency and capability even when we forget to acknowledge it. The Emperor's greatest lesson was not that individuals with sufficient power can save civilizations. It was that saving civilizations requires distributed effort, that no single being or institution can bear such burden indefinitely without becoming the very tyranny they opposed. And in Meditation Chamber on Taris, in the place where the Emperor's physical form had first manifested after arriving in this galaxy, something stirred. Not his consciousness reasserting individual identity. That transformation had been permanent, his distributed presence now too integrated with the Force's natural flow to reconstitute as distinct being. But echo of his presence, concentrated by 5 years of being seeking wisdom in location where his power had been most tangible. The young boy who had discovered the golden path 5 years ago, now young man whose mastery combined light and dark in ratios that shifted based on circumstances, felt that echo and opened himself to whatever wisdom it might convey. Understanding flooded through his consciousness, refined through 5 years of being distributed across the Force, but still recognizably the Emperor's essential nature. The vision showed him possibilities, not prophecy, not predetermined future, but branching probabilities that quantum mechanics made real. Timelines where the golden path thrived and spread, where beings across the galaxy learned to transcend binary thinking. Timelines where it collapsed under pressure from beings who preferred certainty over complexity, who chose comfortable absolutes over uncomfortable synthesis timelines, where external threats from beyond the galaxy arrived and tested whether what had been built could survive genuine existential crisis. All possible, none certain. Reality responding to consciousness and choice rather than predetermined fate. The young man opened his eyes, understanding what the vision conveyed. The Emperor had not saved the galaxy. He had given it tools to save itself, had demonstrated that alternatives to binary thinking existed, had established principles that would function if beings chose to embody them, and fail if beings preferred comfortable certainty over uncomfortable growth. The future was not written. The golden path was not guaranteed, but choice itself, genuine choice, freed from false dichotomies that had constrained civilizations for millennia. That was the Emperor's gift, and that gift would endure as long as beings valued possibility over certainty, growth over stagnation, uncomfortable truth over comfortable delusion. On Coruscant, in the Senate chambers, Mon Mothma concluded her final address as Chancellor. After serving the 5-year term the new Republic's constitution permitted, she had guided the Republic through reconstruction, had established diplomatic relations with the Imperium Reborn, had demonstrated that democratic governance could function effectively when built on honest acknowledgement of limitations rather than pretense of competence. "We stand at crossroads," Mon Mothma stated, her voice carrying across the chamber and beyond through holonet broadcasts that reached 1 billion worlds. The galaxy has been fundamentally transformed by events 5 years ago. The Emperor of mankind arrived, defeated our greatest darkness, and departed. Not through death in conventional sense, but through transformation into something that transcends individual existence. Some call him God, some call him teacher, some call him cautionary tale about power's dangers. All are correct, all are incomplete. She paused, allowing her words to resonate before continuing. What matters is not what we call him, but what we learned from his intervention. That binary thinking produces binary outcomes. That alternatives exist when beings possess courage to perceive them. That no single governance model serves all populations equally well. That democracy and effectiveness are not mutually exclusive when we build institutions that actually serve rather than merely persist. The Republic was dead. We have rebuilt it as something new, borrowing from what worked while discarding what failed. The Imperium Reborn demonstrates that other models can succeed when properly implemented. The Jedi Order shows that traditions can evolve without losing their essential nature. And everywhere beings walk the golden path, not because the Emperor commands them, but because they discover it aligns with their nature better than orthodox alternatives. This is his legacy. Not empire spanning the galaxy, not worship demanding obedience, but choice, genuine choice, freed from false dichotomies that had imprisoned consciousness for millennia. Whether we honor that legacy or betray it will be determined by decisions we make in years ahead. Choose wisely. Reality does not care about our preferences, it simply exists, operating according to rules that work, whether we acknowledge them or not. The Senate chamber erupted in applause, not universal, not unanimous, but substantial. The new republic had learned to accept disagreement without treating it as existential threat, had incorporated the Emperor's principle that variety strengthened rather than weakened civilization, had demonstrated that beings could function without requiring absolute certainty about cosmic truth. Far above Coruscant, in orbit where no instruments could detect it, the Emperor's distributed consciousness observed what his intervention had achieved, not perfect, not complete, not guaranteed to endure, but genuine alternative to civilizations he had known across 38,000 years. Authority structures that served rather than dominated, power that protected rather than exploited, principles that enabled rather than constrained. He had paid everything for this achievement: his imperium, his sons, his physical form, his individual identity. Everything he had been across 2 galaxies and millennia beyond counting, and watching populations choose their own paths, forge their own alternatives, learn through experience, rather than being commanded by authority they could not question. He discovered that the cost had been worth it. For 38,000 years, the Emperor had pursued vision of humanity and conscious beings thriving according to principles that served their flourishing. He had built empire to achieve that vision, had created Primarchs to lead it, had sustained Astronomicon through 10,000 years of living death to preserve what he had built. All of it had been insufficient. The Imperium had survived, but stagnated. Humanity had endured, but not thrived. And the Emperor had remained because he could not accept that his methods, however refined, however powerful, however well-intentioned, were incomplete. Here, in this galaxy, he had finally achieved what his own galaxy could not permit: genuine alternative to binary opposition between tyranny and chaos, authority and anarchy, imposed order and evolutionary disorder. The golden path existed now, woven into the Force itself, accessible to any consciousness that sought understanding over certainty, growth over stagnation, complexity over simplicity, and the Emperor of mankind, having given everything to establish that path, dissolved his remaining individual identity into the cosmic flow. Not death, not transcendence, but completion, recognition that his work was done, that what he had built would function without him, that consciousness distributed so widely need not maintain singular identity to remain effective. The golden currents in the Force pulsed one final time, carrying message that every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy perceived simultaneously. The Emperor is gone. The golden path remains. Walk it or reject it, but choose freely. That freedom is my gift. That choice is my legacy. May you use it wisely. Then even the echo faded, leaving only principles woven into reality itself. The galaxy continued. Populations chose their paths. Civilizations rose and fell and transformed, according to rules that combined what had always existed with what the Emperor had introduced. And in meditation chambers across 1 billion worlds, beings who had never met the Emperor in physical form nevertheless felt his presence in the golden currents, not commanding, not controlling, but available, offering wisdom to those who sought it, providing alternatives to those who needed them, enabling possibilities that had not existed before one being from another galaxy decided that this reality deserved better than eternal conflict between false absolutes. The Emperor of Mankind had entered the Star Wars galaxy. He had fought its darkness. He had restructured its metaphysics, and he had departed, leaving behind not empire or worship, but choice itself. The most dangerous and most precious gift that consciousness can give. May the Force be with you. More stories await. The Emperor of Mankind's intervention in the Star Wars galaxy achieved what 38,000 years in his own universe could not. He created genuinely self-sustaining alternative to binary opposition between tyranny and chaos. The golden path he forged demonstrated that consciousness need not choose between light and dark, order and freedom, authority and anarchy. Instead, beings could walk spectrum that contained infinite possibilities, adapting to circumstances rather than being constrained by rigid philosophy. His victory over Darth Sidious was not merely military or even metaphysical, it was epistemological. By rewriting the Force's fundamental nature from mystical energy into biological quantum field operating according to comprehensible principles, he eliminated the false dichotomy that had paralyzed the galaxy for millennia. Light and dark remained valid options, but they were no longer the only options. And that expansion of possibility space meant civilizations could evolve beyond conflicts that had previously seemed inevitable. The cost was everything: his imperium, his return home, his physical form, his individual identity. But in exchange, he gave an entire galaxy something it had never possessed: genuine choice, freed from predetermined categories. The Jedi could evolve beyond their limitations. The Sith philosophy was not destroyed, but contextualized, and populations discovered they could govern themselves according to principles that served rather than constrained them. 5 years after his transformation, the galaxy thrived in ways it never had under Republic democracy or Imperial tyranny. Not perfectly, the Imperium reborn faced challenges. The New Republic struggled with balancing effectiveness and legitimacy. The Golden Path produced failures alongside successes. But the failures were learning opportunities rather than existential crises, because the underlying system acknowledged that no single approach worked universally. The Emperor's legacy was not empire or worship, or even the specific institutions he had helped build. His legacy was epistemological humility combined with operational effectiveness, recognition that reality was more complex than any philosophy could fully capture, paired with commitment to discovering what actually worked through experimentation, rather than imposing what ideology demanded. He had come to save one galaxy and discovered he could transform it. He had fought a god and won by demonstrating that gods built on incomplete philosophy could not survive when reality updated to more accurate models. He had sacrificed everything and gained something that transcended individual existence: integration with cosmic principles that would guide consciousness long after his identity had dissolved into the Force's natural flow. The Emperor of Mankind was gone. The Golden Path remained, and a galaxy learned, slowly and imperfectly but genuinely, how to walk between extremes without falling to either. How to be passionate about service, powerful without domination, certain about principles while acknowledging that implementation required flexibility. That was the final lesson, the ultimate teaching. The synthesis of 38,000 years refined into truth that transcended galaxies. Reality rewards those who seek understanding over those who demand certainty. And civilizations that learn that lesson thrive in ways that civilizations built on comfortable delusions never can. May the Force be with you. More stories await.